Story 1. Parents demanded that I give my golden child sister the $30,000 that I saved up for my college for her to buy an apartment. I'm 19M, currently a college student. My relationship with my family has always been a bit strained, mainly because of how different I am from the rest of them. I've worked hard to achieve what I have, maintaining good grades and even securing a scholarship for college. I thought my efforts would finally earn me some respect, but that wasn't the case. My parents have always favored my sister. She's spoiled, entitled, and used to getting her way. It's been clear to me for a long time that they see her as the golden child, while I'm just the responsible one who's expected to handle things on my own. Every time she screws up, I'm the one who has to pick up the pieces or make sacrifices for her. Over the years, I managed to save up $30,000 for college. This wasn't easy. I earned most of it through part-time jobs and scholarships. This money means everything to me. It's my ticket to a future where I'm not dependent on anyone. But to my parents, it was apparently just another resource to exploit when my sister was short on cash. My sister, Sarah, is 24, but you wouldn't know it by the way she acts. She's been coddled her entire life, always getting whatever she wants without lifting a finger. Right now, she's unemployed and has been for a while. She claims she's figuring things out, but really she just spends her time lounging around doing nothing. Despite this, she's decided that she needs a new apartment, something fancy in a nice part of town. Of course, she has no savings or income to afford it. One evening, my parents sat me down and told me that Sarah had found the perfect place but was short on money for the deposit. They demanded that I hand over my entire college savings of $30,000 to help her secure the apartment. I was floored. They didn't ask, they demanded. And then came the kicker. If I refused, they said I could pack my things and leave. They made it clear that my future was less important to them than making sure Sarah was comfortable. They didn't stop there. My mom pulled the whole family comes first card, and my dad said something about how Sarah had always been there for me, which is a complete lie. They tried to guilt me, saying that if I was a good brother, I'd do this without hesitation. The emotional manipulation was strong. At first, I couldn't even speak. I was in shock, completely blindsided by their demand. I asked them how they could possibly think it was fair to take everything I'd worked for and give it to Sarah, who hadn't lifted a finger to help herself. My dad just shrugged and said it was about keeping the family together. My mom said something about how Sarah needed this apartment more than I needed my savings. That's when it hit me. No matter what I said, they wouldn't listen. They didn't care about what was fair. They only cared about Sarah. Over the next few days, it was a mess. I was constantly weighing my options. I thought about just giving in to avoid being kicked out, but the more I thought about it, the more I realized how wrong that was. Why should I have to sacrifice everything I'd worked for just because my sister couldn't be bothered to take care of herself? But on the other hand, standing my ground meant risking everything. I didn't have anywhere to go if they kicked me out. I was on my own. I even considered reaching out to some extended family members, but I knew it wouldn't help. Most of them were just as taken in by Sarah's act as my parents were. I felt trapped, like no matter what I chose, I was going to lose something important. Finally, I decided I wasn't going to let them push me around. I started researching my legal rights. I knew that as an adult, they couldn't just take my money without my consent. I also made sure to secure all my important documents, birth certificate, passport, bank information, in case things went south. I even started quietly packing some of my valuables and moving them to a friend's place just in case I had to leave in a hurry. I knew I had to be prepared for the worst-case scenario, being kicked out with nowhere to go. So, I reached out to my college's housing office to see if they had any emergency accommodations available. They didn't, but they pointed me towards some local resources that could help. It wasn't much, but it was something. When I finally confronted my parents, I was firm. I told them there was no way I was giving up my savings and that if they really wanted to kick me out over this, I was ready to leave. My dad got furious, accusing me of being selfish and ungrateful. My mom started crying, saying she couldn't believe I was willing to tear this family apart over a little money. If it was really little money, why don't they pay for it then? Sarah, of course, threw a tantrum. She screamed about how I was ruining her life and how I didn't care about her happiness. My parents just stood there, glaring at me, waiting for me to back down. But I didn't. I told them that if they wanted me gone, I'd be out by the end of the week. The next few days were hell. My parents barely spoke to me, and when they did, it was only to throw more guilt my way. My mom started giving me the silent treatment while my dad resorted to making snide comments every time I was in the room. Sarah refused to even look at me, as if I'd personally betrayed her. They kept up with the threats and emotional blackmail, trying to wear me down. Despite the hostile environment, I kept preparing to leave. I secretly moved the rest of my valuables to my friend's place and made arrangements to stay with them temporarily if needed. I also reached out to some other friends, letting them know what was going on. They offered their support and even suggested I look into legal action if things got worse. The breaking point came one morning when I found out that my parents had tried to access my bank account. They thought they could just take the money and deal with the fallout later, but I was one step ahead of them. I'd already emptied the account and closed it. When they realized what I'd done, they were livid. My dad yelled at me, calling me ungrateful and saying that I was destroying the family. My mom just cried and kept asking how I could do this to them. But I didn't back down. I told them that they'd crossed a line and that I was done being their scapegoat. If they wanted me out, I'd leave, but they weren't going to get a single cent of my money. I knew that leaving quietly would just let them spin the story however they wanted, so I decided to take control of the narrative. I posted a detailed account of what had happened on social media. I included everything: how they tried to force me to give up my savings, the threats, the emotional manipulation. I even posted screenshots of their texts and the bank alert showing their attempts to access my account. To make sure the message got across, I tagged not just my parents and sister but also some of their friends and extended family members. I wanted everyone to know the truth. The reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Most people were on my side, offering support and calling out my parents and sister for their behavior. Some of my extended family reached out, shocked and disappointed by what they'd learned. They'd had no idea things were this bad. A few people, mostly my parents' close friends, tried to defend them, but they were drowned out by the criticism. It didn't take long for word to spread. My parents' colleagues and friends started distancing themselves, and I heard that Sarah's plans for her new apartment fell through when the landlord got wind of what was happening. She was furious, blaming me for ruining her life. But I didn't care. They'd all brought this on themselves. The fallout was brutal for my parents. Their carefully curated image as the perfect family was shattered. My dad's work relationships became strained as his colleagues began to see him in a different light. My mom, who prided herself on her social standing, found herself being quietly excluded from her usual circles. And Sarah? She lost her chance at the apartment she wanted so badly, and no one was rushing to offer her another one. After the showdown, I moved in with a supportive friend. It wasn't ideal, but it was better than staying in that toxic environment. Adjusting to independence was tough, but it also felt freeing. I could finally focus on my studies and my future without constantly worrying about what my family would try to take from me next. My parents didn't take the fallout well. They flooded my phone with calls and messages, alternating between threats and desperate pleas for me to take down the post and come back home. They even tried to twist the narrative, claiming I'd overreacted and that they were just trying to help Sarah out of a tough situation. But by then, it was too late. Everyone knew the truth. I decided to maintain a strict no-contact stance. I blocked them on all platforms and made sure they couldn't reach me. I also sought legal advice about potentially getting a restraining order if they didn't back off. It wasn't an easy decision, but it was necessary. I couldn't let them drag me down anymore. In the aftermath, a few estranged relatives reached out, offering their help and expressing regret for not getting involved sooner. My college even offered additional financial aid after hearing about my situation, which was a huge relief. Through all of this, I've grown a lot. I'm more confident and self-reliant than I ever was before. My academic performance has actually improved now that I'm not constantly stressed about my family. I've also made new friends and built a support network that I can actually rely on. Looking ahead, I'm focused on achieving complete financial independence. I'm also seriously considering cutting ties with my family for good. The cycle of toxicity has gone on long enough, and I'm committed to breaking it. It's not going to be easy, but I'm determined to build a better future for myself. One where I'm not constantly looking over my shoulder, waiting for the next betrayal. So, Reddit, I defer. Refusing to give up my college savings to my sister and for going public with what my family tried to do to me? Update 1. It's been about 3 months since I posted my original story, and a lot has happened. I want to thank everyone for their support and advice. It really helped me get through some tough times. After I moved out and went public with what happened, things got pretty crazy. My parents and Sarah didn't take it well at all. They kept trying to contact me, switching between angry threats and guilt-tripping. I stayed firm with my no-contact rule, but it wasn't easy. About a week after I left, my mom showed up at my friend's place where I was staying. I have no idea how she found out where I was. She was crying and begging me to come home, saying they'd made a mistake and wanted to make things right. I almost felt bad for her. But then she started in on how I was tearing the family apart, and how Sarah was suffering because of me. That's when I knew nothing had really changed. I told her to leave or I'd call the police. She left, but not before saying I was breaking her heart. The next day, my dad called my college, trying to get information about my classes and schedule. Luckily, I'd already talked to the administration about my situation, so they didn't give him anything. But it freaked me out that he was trying to track me down like that. Things escalated when Sarah started showing up at places she knew I frequented. The library, the coffee shop near campus, even outside some of my classes. She'd try to corner me, alternating between screaming at me for ruining her life and begging me to give her the money. It got so bad that I had to change my routines and ask friends to walk with me between classes. About a month after I left, I got a call from my aunt, my mom's sister. She said she wanted to meet up and talk. I was hesitant, but she had always been kind to me, so I agreed to meet her in a public place. When I got there, I found out my parents had put her up to it, and they were hiding at a nearby table, waiting for me. I felt so betrayed. I left immediately and blocked my aunt's number too. The social media fallout continued. My parents tried to do damage control by posting their own version of events, claiming I was a troubled kid who had stolen money from them and run away. Some people believed them, but most saw through it. It was hard seeing family, friends, and distant relatives take sides, but I was grateful for those who stood by me. Sarah took it to another level. She started a GoFundMe campaign, claiming she was a victim of financial abuse and needed help to escape a toxic family situation. She used my name in it, twisting the story to make it sound like I was the abuser. I had to get a lawyer involved to get the campaign taken down. Speaking of lawyers, my parents threatened legal action against me. They claimed I owed them money for raising me and that they had a right to my savings. It was ridiculous, but it scared me enough to seek legal advice. The lawyer assured me they had no case but advised me to keep documenting everything just in case. About 2.5 months after I left, I got a surprising email from Jack, Sarah's ex-boyfriend. They'd broken up a few months before all this happened, and I'd always thought he was a decent guy who got sucked into my family's drama. He apologized for not reaching out sooner and said he wanted me to know he supported me. Jack told me some things about Sarah that shocked me. Apparently, she'd been cheating on him throughout their relationship, often with guys who could buy her expensive gifts or take her on trips. He said she was always talking about how she deserved a more luxurious lifestyle, and how unfair it was that she had to work for anything. It made me see her behavior in a new light. I also found out from Jack that Sarah had been fired from her last job for stealing. My parents had covered it up, paying back what she took to keep the company from pressing charges. I was furious that they'd done that while expecting me to give up my hard-earned savings. About 3 months after I left, I got a call from a number I didn't recognize. It turned out to be my grandfather, my dad's father. We'd never been close. He lived in another state, and we only saw him every few years. He said he'd heard what happened from a cousin and wanted to hear my side of the story. I was cautious at first after what happened with the aunt I trusted, but as we talked, I realized he was genuinely concerned. He told me that he'd had his own issues with my dad over the years and that he wasn't surprised by what had happened. He apologized for not being more present in my life and offered to help me out financially if I needed it. I was touched by his offer, but I told him I wanted to make it on my own. He respected that but said the offer would stand if I ever changed my mind. It meant a lot to know that I had some family on my side. The conversation with my grandfather made me curious about other family members I'd lost touch with. I reached out to a couple of cousins on my mom's side who I'd always gotten along with. One of them, Megan, told me she'd had her own issues with my parents and Sarah over the years. Megan told me something that made me extremely angry, as I didn't know about it. While living with them a few years ago, she'd been going through a tough divorce and needed a place to stay for a few weeks. My parents had initially offered to let her stay with them, but then Sarah complained that she didn't want Megan invading her space. My parents kicked Megan out after just 3 days, leaving her to sleep on friends' couches until she could find an apartment. I couldn't believe they'd do that to family while demanding I give up everything for Sarah. As all this was happening, I was still trying to figure out my living situation. My friends' parents were kind enough to let me stay with them, but I knew it couldn't be a long-term solution. I started looking for a cheap apartment near campus, but everything was out of my price range. A few days later, I ran into one of Sarah's friends at the grocery store. She tried to guilt-trip me, saying Sarah was depressed and it was all my fault. I asked her if Sarah had told her the whole story. She admitted she only knew Sarah's version. I gave her my side of things, and I could see the doubt creeping into her expression. She left looking confused, and I felt a small sense of satisfaction. The next day, I got a call from the bank. Someone had tried to access my new account using my social security number. The bank had flagged it as suspicious activity and blocked it. I knew immediately it had to be my parents. I filed a police report and started the process of putting a freeze on my credit. I was shaken by how far they were willing to go. I decided it was time to take more serious action. I went back to the lawyer I'd consulted earlier and started the process of getting a restraining order against my parents and Sarah. It was a drastic step, but I felt like I had no choice. The day before the hearing for the restraining order, I got a frantic call from my mom. She was crying, saying she'd heard about the hearing and begging me not to go through with it. She said it would destroy the family and ruin their lives. I told her they should have thought of that before they tried to steal from me and harass me, and hung up. The hearing itself was intense. My parents and Sarah showed up with a lawyer of their own. They tried to paint me as an ungrateful, troubled kid who was lashing out at his loving family. But I had evidence, the texts, the emails, the social media posts, the bank records. The judge saw through their act and granted the restraining order. After the hearing, as I was leaving the courthouse, Sarah tried to approach me one last time. She looked terrible, like she hadn't been sleeping. She started to say something about how sorry she was, but then her face twisted, and she spat out, "I hope you're happy now that you've ruined all our lives." A bailiff stepped in and led her away. It was the last time I saw her. I've also started looking for a part-time job to help cover my living expenses. It's tough balancing work and school, but it feels good to be fully independent. I'm determined to make it on my own. I'm not going to lie, it's been a tough few months. There are days when I miss having a family, even if it was a dysfunctional one. Holidays are especially hard. So that's where things stand now. I'm still processing everything that's happened, but I'm moving forward. Final update. It's been about a year since my last update, and I can't believe how much has changed. I want to thank everyone for their continued support throughout this journey. Your encouragement has meant more than you know. After the restraining order hearing, things were quiet for a while. I thought maybe my family had finally gotten the message. But you know what they say about the calm before the storm. About 3 months ago, I got an unexpected call from my uncle, my dad's brother. We'd never been close, but he sounded genuinely concerned. He told me that things had spiraled out of control with my parents and Sarah. Apparently, Sarah had gotten involved with some shady people and owed them a lot of money. My parents, in their infinite wisdom, had taken out a second mortgage on the house to try to pay off her debts, but it wasn't enough. One night, these people Sarah owed money to showed up at my parents' house. Things got ugly. My uncle didn't have all the details, but he said the police were involved and my dad ended up in the hospital with a broken arm. Here's where it gets really messed up. My parents, despite everything, are still trying to protect Sarah. They told the police it was just a random break-in, but word got out in the family about what really happened. A few days after my uncle's call, I started getting messages from my parents again. I unblocked them as they are still my parents. Big mistake. They were begging me to come home, saying they needed my help. They even tried to guilt me by saying that if I'd just given them the money when they asked, none of this would have happened. Can you believe it? They're still trying to make this my fault somehow. I ignored their messages. I've also managed to save up enough to move out of my friend's house into a better apartment in a more secure building. It's a bit further from campus, but worth it for the peace of mind. But then Sarah showed up at my apartment, ignoring the restraining order. I have no idea how she found out where I live, as I had moved recently. She was a mess, crying, begging for money, saying she was in danger. I told her to leave or I'd call the cops. She screamed that I was killing her, and that if anything happened to her, it would be my fault. It was awful. I called my lawyer right after that, and we're in the process of extending the restraining order to include my current address. I've also had to inform my landlord and neighbors about the situation just in case Sarah or my parents try anything. On top of all this drama, I found out through other family members that my parents have been telling everyone that I'm the one who got Sarah into trouble. They're claiming I introduced her to these shady people and that I owe them money too. This is complete nonsense, but some relatives are believing it. I've had to block a bunch of people on social media because of the hateful messages I was getting. I've also made some great friends over the past year. They've become like a chosen family to me. We're even planning a celebration together. As for the latest updates with my parents and Sarah, I've heard through the grapevine that they're facing foreclosure on the house. Part of me feels bad for them, but a bigger part knows that they brought this on themselves. I can't help but think about how different things could have been if they just respected my boundaries and treated me fairly. So that's where things stand now. Thank you all again for your support throughout this journey. Couldn't have done it without you. Now on to the next story. Story 2. I've never thought I'd be posting here, but after the week I've had, I need some outside perspective. I recently spent 5 days in the hospital with what turned out to be a major medical emergency, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around how my husband, 45M, of 16 years, handled the situation. It's been eating at me, and I don't have anyone else to talk to about this. We are a family of 4: me, my son, my daughter, and my husband. Last Tuesday started like any other day. I woke up with this weird stabbing pain in my right side. It was intense enough that I had to sit on the edge of the bed for a few minutes before I could even stand up straight. I tried to brush it off, popped a couple of Advil, made my son's lunch, and drove to work anyway because I had this big presentation I'd been preparing for weeks. My husband was still asleep when I left since he worked the second shift. Our daughter was away on a 2-week college trip with limited phone access, so it was just the 3 of us at home during this whole ordeal. I didn't even tell her what happened until she got back, since there was nothing she could do from thousands of miles away, and I didn't want to ruin her trip. By lunchtime, the pain had gotten so bad I couldn't even focus on my computer screen. I kept thinking it would pass, but then I got lightheaded in the middle of a meeting and had to excuse myself. My coworker Jenny found me curled up in the bathroom stall, sweating through my blouse. She immediately offered to drive me to urgent care. Even though we had a deadline that afternoon, I kept telling her I just needed a minute, but she practically dragged me to her car. The urgent care doctor took one look at me and called for an ambulance to the ER. That scared the hell out of me. My blood pressure was 82/45, which apparently is dangerously low. I remember the doctor saying something about a possible internal hemorrhage to the EMTs. They wouldn't even let me walk to the ambulance. In the ER, they hooked me up to all these machines, drew about a gallon of blood, and rushed me in for a CT scan. That's when they found significant internal bleeding in my abdomen from what they suspected was a ruptured blood vessel near my liver. The ER doctor said they needed to monitor me closely and might need to perform emergency surgery if the bleeding didn't stop on its own. I called my husband from the ER bed at around 2:30 p.m. Our son would need to be picked up from school at 3:15. When I explained what was happening, there was this long pause on the phone, like he was annoyed at the inconvenience. He finally said he would pick up our 8-year-old son from school and then figure things out. "No, are you okay? or "I'll be right there." I spent the next 6 hours alone in the ER, getting poked with needles every hour, undergoing more scans, and talking to various doctors who all had different theories about what was happening to me. A vascular surgeon came by and explained the risks of intervention versus watchful waiting. A hematologist wanted to run tests for bleeding disorders. An oncologist was called in because they were concerned about potential masses. Nobody could figure out what caused the bleeding, which was somehow even more terrifying. By 8 p.m., I still hadn't seen or heard from my husband since that initial call. My phone was about to die, so I sent him a text asking if he was coming to the hospital. He replied that our son had homework and he needed to make dinner, so he'd try to come if there was time. He didn't come that night. I was admitted to a hospital room around 11 p.m., still completely alone, wearing nothing but a thin hospital gown with my ass hanging out as the transport team wheeled me through the cold hallways. That first night was the worst. Every hour, someone came in to check my vitals and take more blood. The nurses kept asking if I had someone coming to stay with me. Each time I said my husband might come tomorrow, they gave me this look that was somewhere between pity and concern. I kept thinking about my dad, who died from an aneurysm when I was 19. He went from perfectly healthy to gone in 48 hours. I couldn't stop wondering if the same thing was happening to me. The next day, my husband finally showed up around 2 p.m. with a change of clothes and my phone charger. He didn't bring my toothbrush or deodorant, though I'd asked for those specifically. He stayed for exactly 22 minutes. I timed it on the hospital room clock before saying he needed to get back to work. He missed meeting with the vascular specialist who came by 10 minutes after he left to discuss my treatment plan and potential causes for the bleeding. That doctor ordered more tests and mentioned the possibility of a rare genetic condition. That evening, my mother-in-law called my hospital room. She said she'd only just heard I was in the hospital from my sister-in-law, who saw my Facebook post asking for good thoughts. My Amiel was upset that my husband hadn't told her and immediately offered to watch our son, so my husband could stay with me. I thanked her but said I'd have my husband call her. He never did. During the next 4 days in the hospital, my husband visited twice more. Each visit lasted less than 30 minutes. The first time he brought our son, who gave me a quick hug before plopping down in the chair and playing games on his tablet the entire time. I understand his age and that hospitals are boring, but my husband made no effort to engage him or help him interact with me. During his final visit, the attending physician came by to discuss my case. Instead of listening or asking questions about my condition, my husband kept interrupting the doctor to complain about the hospital parking fees, $8 per day, which yes, is annoying, and how much the insurance was being charged for my room. The doctor looked so uncomfortable. After he left, my husband said, "Well, at least we've met our deductible for the year. That's it." That was the extent of his support during a time when doctors were telling me I could have died if I'd waited any longer to seek treatment. What bothers me most is that we have plenty of family support. My mother-in-law is retired, lives 15 minutes away, and repeatedly offered to watch our son. My sister also offered to help, as did 2 of our neighbors. My husband simply chose not to arrange any childcare that would allow him to stay with me. He didn't even bring me real food, even though the hospital cafeteria was right downstairs and he knows I hate hospital food. Each night I lay there alone, watching other patients with family members who stayed overnight, brought them food, advocated for them with nurses, or just held their hand through scary procedures. The woman in the bed next to mine had her husband there constantly. He slept in that uncomfortable recliner chair for 3 nights straight. They were in their 70s and he never left her side. When a doctor mentioned the possibility of cancer as one explanation for the unexplained bleeding, they needed to rule it out. I had no one beside me to process this information. I just nodded and said I understood the plan for additional testing, then spent the night staring at the ceiling, imagining the worst. By Saturday, the bleeding had stopped on its own and my blood counts were slowly improving. They scheduled me for discharge on Sunday. I texted my husband on Saturday night to let him know I'd be coming home around noon the next day and would need a ride. Sunday morning, as I was waiting for the discharge paperwork, he texted that he was in the middle of a football game with friends at the park. So, it would be easier if you could just Uber. So that's what I did. I called an Uber while barely able to walk, carrying a plastic bag with my belongings. When I arrived home, the house was a complete disaster. Dishes piled in the sink from what looked like days of meals, laundry overflowing the hamper, pizza boxes on the counter, and empty soda cans everywhere. And in the middle of it all, my husband and son were playing video games on the couch. Neither of them even stopped playing when I walked in the door. I stood there for a full minute, still wearing the hospital bracelet, holding my little bag of belongings, and neither of them even looked up. Finally, I just went to the bedroom, took a shower to wash off 5 days of hospital grime, and then went to the kitchen to make myself a sandwich because I was starving. While I was in there, I started cleaning up a bit, despite doctor's orders to rest and avoid any exertion for 2 weeks. My husband walked in, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and walked out without saying a word. Here's what I don't understand. When my husband had kidney stones 3 years ago, I took a week off work, stayed at the hospital overnight in that same uncomfortable recliner, and handled everything at home. I arranged playdates for our son, kept the house running, and still visited daily with home-cooked meals and clean clothes. When his father was hospitalized last year with heart problems, I managed our household solo for 2 weeks, so he could be at his dad's bedside daily. I drove our son to and from school, handled all his activities, cooked, cleaned, and took care of everything so my husband could focus entirely on his father. I never once complained because that's what partners do. We renewed our vows on our 15th anniversary last year in front of 50 friends and family members. He stood there with tears in his eyes and publicly promised to stand by me in sickness and in health, for better or worse. I believed him, but the first real test of that promise came, and he effectively left me on my own when I was at my most vulnerable. I haven't directly confronted him yet about any of this because I'm still recovering and don't have the energy for what will inevitably turn into an argument. He's acting like everything is completely normal. This morning, he asked why I hadn't done laundry yet. When I reminded him that the doctor said no lifting over 5 pounds, he just shrugged and said, "The laundry basket doesn't weigh 5 pounds empty. My mother died of cancer, so hospitals already terrify me. I spent my teenage years watching her fade away in a hospital room, and the smell of disinfectant still triggers panic attacks sometimes. Then, just a few years later, my dad died suddenly from an aneurysm. My husband knows this. He knows about my medical anxiety. He was with me through a miscarriage in 2012 where I completely fell apart and needed therapy afterward. Facing this recent experience without any support from the one person who promised to be there for me has left me questioning our entire relationship. Was it always this one-sided, and I just never noticed? Or did something change that I missed? Am I being dramatic for expecting my husband to actually stay with me during a life-threatening medical emergency? Or am I overreacting to what he might just see as practical time management? I keep trying to see his perspective. Maybe he thought he was doing the right thing by maintaining our son's routine. Or maybe he truly believed I was fine on my own. But I can't stop feeling like I've suddenly seen our relationship clearly for the first time, and it's nothing like what I thought it was. Edit. Wow, I didn't expect this many responses. Thank you to everyone who took the time to comment. I'm trying to respond when I can, but still not feeling 100%. To answer some common questions. 1. My mother-in-law specifically texted my husband offering to watch our son so he could stay with me. I saw the messages on his phone. He never took her up on it or even responded to her. 2. I didn't explicitly ask him to stay longer because when I've asked for support in the past, he's made it clear it's an inconvenience. The last time I had a medical issue, severe flu, he complained about having to do everything while I was sick. 3. No, I've never given him reason to think I would be fine alone in medical situations. Actually, the opposite. He knows about my hospital anxiety. He's seen me have panic attacks in medical settings before. 4. My doctor says I'm not supposed to lift anything over 5 pounds or do housework for at least 2 weeks while I heal. The bleeding could restart with exertion. 5. The doctors still don't know what caused the bleeding, and I have follow-up appointments with a hematologist and a vascular specialist next week. 6. For those asking about his behavior in other aspects of our relationship, yes, there have been other occasions where I felt unsupported, but nothing this extreme. He's generally an involved father and contributes to household expenses, but emotional support has always been minimal. 7. No, he doesn't have anxiety around hospitals or medical situations. His father was hospitalized multiple times last year, and he had no issues staying there for hours. Update. It's been almost 4 weeks since my hospital stay, and I wanted to update everyone who commented and messaged me. First, thank you to the people who took the time to respond. I was completely overwhelmed by the sheer volume of comments and support. I read every single one, even though I couldn't respond to them all. I didn't expect my post to blow up like that. Honestly, I thought maybe a few people would tell me I was being unreasonable and then I'd just try to get over it. Instead, the response made me realize that what happened wasn't normal or acceptable, and I wasn't crazy for feeling hurt and abandoned. I finally talked to my husband about how I felt during my hospital stay. I've been putting it off because I was dreading the conversation, but it finally happened last week when we were discussing our son's upcoming dental surgery to remove an impacted tooth. I mentioned that I would need to take the day off work for his procedure, and my husband immediately questioned why I needed to be there at all. He's just getting a tooth pulled, not major surgery, he said. The dentist knows what they're doing. You'd just be sitting in the waiting room wasting time. That comment was like a match to gasoline after everything that had happened. I told him that being there for family during medical procedures is what partners and parents do. And I pointed out the painful irony of him questioning why I would want to support our son during a procedure when he couldn't be bothered to support me during a life-threatening emergency. I got extremely angry and told him everything from how I spent 5 days mostly alone, how I had to process scary medical information with no support, how I had to Uber home from the hospital because he was playing football with his buddies. I told him that lying in a hospital bed while doctors discussed internal bleeding and possible cancer was one of the most terrifying experiences of my life, and his absence spoke volumes about how little he valued me. His response floored me, though maybe it shouldn't have. What exactly was I supposed to do there? Just sit around staring at you for hours? You were being taken care of by professionals. I had work and our kid to deal with. I tried to explain that emotional support isn't about doing something tangible. It's about being present, having someone to talk to, someone to hold my hand during painful procedures, and having an advocate when I was too medicated or scared to think clearly. I also pointed out that if decisions about emergency surgery had been needed, which was a real possibility, he wouldn't have been there to make them. He actually scoffed at me. He literally made a dismissive pfft sound and rolled his eyes. "You're being dramatic as usual," he said. "Nothing bad happened in the end, so what's the big deal? You always make mountains out of molehills." When I pointed out that he hadn't even arranged childcare despite multiple offers from family members, he said our son needed normalcy, not to be shuffled around to different houses. He was being a good father. I asked him how he would have felt if our situations were reversed. If he had been hospitalized with a life-threatening condition and I had barely visited and then asked him to take an Uber home. He just shrugged and said, "I wouldn't have expected you to drop everything. I'm not needy." That's when I realized we were operating from completely different values. It wasn't just that he failed to support me. It's that he genuinely doesn't believe support during a medical crisis is necessary or important. For him, in sickness and in health apparently means, I'll pay part of the medical bills and maybe visit occasionally if I have nothing better to do. When I suggested that this incident made me concerned about how he'd handle future health crises, especially given my family history of aneurysm and cancer, he walked out of the room and slammed the door like a teenager having a tantrum. For the next several days, he barely spoke to me except to ask where things were or when dinner would be ready. When I tried to revisit the conversation about a week later, he shut it down immediately, saying he was done talking about ancient history and that I needed to stop dwelling on the past. The whole experience forced me to reflect on our relationship patterns over the past 16 years. I started noticing that this wasn't isolated behavior but part of a consistent pattern I've been overlooking or excusing. When our daughter broke her arm during a soccer game 2 years ago, he dropped her off at the ER and went back to work, leaving me to handle everything despite it being my busiest time at work. When I had a miscarriage between our children, he went golfing the next day because staying home wouldn't change anything. The hospital incident wasn't an anomaly. It was just so extreme that I couldn't ignore it or explain it away anymore. It forced me to see our relationship clearly for the first time. My recovery has been slower than expected. The follow-up appointment with the vascular specialist revealed that I have a relatively rare condition called hepatic artery aneurysm, which had ruptured and caused the bleeding. It's something I'll need to monitor for the rest of my life with regular scans, and I have a 15% to 20% chance of developing another aneurysm elsewhere. When I shared this diagnosis with my husband, he glanced up from his phone for about 3 seconds and said, "Well, at least insurance covered most of it," then went back to scrolling. No questions about what this means for my future health. No concern about the ongoing risks, nothing. I've realized I've been fooling myself about the kind of partnership we have. For practical reasons, divorce isn't an option right now. My job in healthcare administration doesn't pay enough for me to support myself and 2 children in our expensive area, especially with my ongoing medical costs. My son is thriving in his current school, and moving would mean uprooting him from his entire support system of teachers and specialists. My daughter is in her sophomore year at the community college nearby and still lives at home. With current housing costs, she can't afford to move out, and I don't want to disrupt her education. My husband makes nearly 3 times what I do, and the reality is that I'm financially trapped for the time being. So, I've made some practical changes. 1. I've updated my medical power of attorney to list my sister instead of my husband. 2. I've started putting small amounts from each paycheck into a separate account he doesn't know about. 3. I've also quietly started therapy on my own using my employee assistance program so it doesn't show up on our insurance. The therapist has helped me see how I've been making excuses for his behavior for years and minimizing my own needs. One thing several commenters suggested was asking my husband to go to couples counseling. I did bring it up, and his response was predictable. We don't need some stranger telling us how to run our marriage. That's for people with real problems. When I pointed out that I thought we did have real problems, he said I was creating drama and walked away. For now, I'm viewing our relationship as a co-parenting arrangement with shared housing rather than a partnership. I'm focusing on my health, my children. I'm cordial but distant with my husband, and I no longer expect emotional support from him. I'm planning for a future where I can support myself and my children independently, even if that's several years away. The most unexpected outcome of all this has been my relationship with my mother-in-law. After reading many comments suggesting I talk to her, I finally opened up to her about what happened. To my surprise, she wasn't shocked at all. Apparently, my husband's father was exactly the same way, emotionally unavailable and dismissive of her needs throughout their marriage. She told me she stayed for financial reasons until my husband graduated college, then divorced his father. She said watching my situation was like seeing her own marriage play out again, and she apologized for not speaking up sooner. She even offered to loan me money if I decide to leave, though I'm not ready to take that step yet. Last weekend was my daughter's 20th birthday. I planned a small celebration at home, and during the party, my mother-in-law pulled me aside and whispered, "You deserve better than this. Don't waste as many years as I did waiting for him to change." Coming from her, that hit hard. It's strange to be living in this limbo. Technically married, but emotionally divorced. Sharing a home with someone who feels more like a roommate than a partner. It's not what I wanted or expected after 16 years of marriage and building a family together. But pretending everything is fine would require a level of self-deception I'm no longer capable of. For those who asked about my medical recovery, I'm doing better physically. The bruising has finally faded, and I'm back at work full-time, though I still get tired easily. I have another follow-up appointment next month, and I've already arranged for my sister to come with me instead of even asking my husband. Thank you again to everyone who took the time to comment on my original post. So many of you shared similar experiences or offered advice that helped me see my situation more clearly. I didn't realize how much I needed validation that expecting basic support during a medical crisis wasn't unreasonable. Sometimes you need strangers on the internet to point out what should be obvious. That, in sickness and in health, shouldn't come with an asterisk and a list of exceptions. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Saved money to retire early at 35 while my parents paid everything for my genius brother. Now, his business failed, and they want my savings to help him. When I refused, they cut me off. Growing up, my brother was the clear golden child in our family. He had the grades, the charm, the attention. It was like he could do no wrong in my parents' eyes. He was the straight-A student with big dreams, while I was the hard worker. It's not that I wasn't smart, but I wasn't what my parents called naturally gifted. In their minds, his intelligence was going to take him places while I'd need to put in the work, and honestly, they weren't wrong about the work part. My brother was always told that his smarts would earn him everything he wanted, like life would somehow lay out a red carpet for him. I, on the other hand, was on my own. After high school, I went to a public college nearby and worked jobs while studying, saving as much as I could and keeping my head down. I didn't rely on my parents to cover my bills or tuition. I made it work, taking on night shifts, tutoring, and even doing some freelancing to make ends meet. Those early years taught me a lot about budgeting, self-discipline, and independence, lessons I'm grateful for now. I also started reading up on personal finance and investing. Once I graduated, I landed a job in tech. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid well, and I threw myself into it, climbing the ladder. While my friends and coworkers were getting new cars, upgrading their apartments, or going on vacations, I kept my spending in check. I maxed out my 401k, opened an IRA, invested in a mix of stocks and index funds, and learned to live way below my means. My motto was always, if you can live on half your income, you're halfway to freedom. That mindset got me through a decade of work, and it paid off. As my portfolio grew, I started to see that early retirement wasn't just a pipe dream. It was a reality within my reach. Around the time I was working hard to save and invest, my brother was on a very different path. He attended an elite private university, one that came with an equally elite price tag. My parents were thrilled about it. They'd always dreamed of seeing him in an Ivy League-like environment, surrounded by future leaders and big names. They proudly paid nearly all his tuition and covered most of his living expenses. For them, it was a chance to see their golden child fulfill his potential, and they didn't want him to have any financial worries along the way. My brother, of course, was happy to accept this support. He was used to the idea that my parents would take care of him, and he didn't think twice about the expenses involved. After college, my brother landed a high-paying job, which gave my parents even more reason to believe their investment would pay off. They expected him to climb the ladder quickly and keep that promising momentum going. But things didn't go quite as planned. He changed jobs frequently, often chasing the next big title or trying to find an opportunity that would align with his lofty expectations. Despite the high salaries he earned, he never seemed to find his footing. There was always something that didn't sit right with him. Either the job didn't meet his standards or he felt he was being overlooked. So he'd leave, confident he'd find something better soon. My brother's lifestyle was another part of the equation. He made good money, but he spent even better money. He rented fancy apartments with views of the city skyline, updated his wardrobe with designer suits, and always had the latest tech gadgets. He lived like someone at the top of his game, even if his career wasn't quite as solid as he wanted. He even started a business at one point. I'll admit I admired his ambition, and I could tell my parents were hopeful that he'd finally found his big break. But within the first year, the business tanked. The fallout from it left him reeling. Credit card bills, vendor fees, and unpaid salaries piled up quickly, leaving him with financial burdens he hadn't anticipated. Despite the setbacks, my parents were always there for him, ready to help whenever he hit a rough patch. When he was behind on rent, they'd cover it. When he needed extra cash for a new apartment after his business failed, they stepped in, and whenever he faced an emergency, they bailed him out without question. In their eyes, he was still their prodigy, someone with all the potential in the world who just needed a little more time, a little more support, and maybe a few more chances to get it right. Each time he stumbled, they believed it was just a temporary setback before he would inevitably make it big. Meanwhile, I was steadily building my own life and financial future. I wasn't earning as much as my brother, but I was cautious with my money. I lived modestly, saved as much as I could, and invested wisely. After years of steady saving and investing, I finally hit my goal. At 35, I realized I'd saved enough to retire early. I had reached the point where I didn't need a paycheck anymore. I could finally choose what I wanted to do with my days. It was a joy and relief that I could barely put into words. I'd worked so hard for this moment, and to finally be here felt like a dream. I decided to share the news with my family, thinking they'd be proud of what I'd accomplished. My brother congratulated me, but my parents' reaction was strange. They offered polite smiles, but I could tell something was off. They quickly changed the subject, and I chalked it up to them just needing time to process it. I figured they'd come around eventually, but things didn't go that way. Shortly after, I noticed small, subtle comments here and there, mostly from my parents at first. They'd mention in passing how everyone has their struggles, or how family should be there for each other through thick and thin. It was odd, but I brushed it off. I didn't think it was directed at me or my financial situation. But then the comments started getting a bit more direct. They'd bring up my brother, talking about how he was working hard, and how he was still a prodigy with great potential, but had just faced some unfortunate setbacks. They'd mention that not everyone has the same opportunities to save, or that not everyone has the same luck with money. I tried to ignore it, but the hints kept coming, and it started to feel like they were building up to something. One evening after a family dinner, my mom finally came out with it. She told me they were worried about my brother, mentioning that he was stressed about his debts and that it was keeping him up at night. She said he just needed a little help to get back on his feet. She didn't come out and ask directly, but she hinted strongly, saying how fortunate I'd been with my career and my investments and that maybe, just maybe, I could lend him a hand. I told her politely that I'd think about it, hoping that would end the conversation, but it only fueled their efforts. Over the next couple of weeks, my parents kept dropping hints, each one stronger than the last. They'd mention how unfair it was that one child would retire young while the other was still struggling, or how, if one family member succeeds, they all succeed. It was becoming clear they thought I should split my savings with him or at least loan him a substantial amount to get him on his feet. They figured since I wasn't working anymore, I wouldn't miss the money and could spare some for family. The more they talked, the more it hurt. I realized that to them, my hard work wasn't really worth celebrating. It was just a pool of resources they could tap into for my brother's sake. They saw my success as something I could share, as if I owed it to the family. But this wasn't some windfall or inheritance. This was the result of years of living simply, sacrificing, and focusing on a single goal. I hadn't asked them for a penny since I left for college. My brother, on the other hand, had relied on them at almost every turn, yet they still expected me to be the one to bail him out now. Last night, my dad called and laid it all out. He said they thought I was being selfish for not offering to help my brother. They said the family was supposed to be there for each other, and since I was clearly well off, I should want to make things easier for him. They even threw in the old line about how they'd raised me, put food on the table, and sacrificed so much to get me to where I am today. Wasn't it my turn to give back? I felt myself breaking down a bit after that call. They were asking me to choose between my future and their approval, and it was tearing me up inside. I'd always respected my parents, and in some ways they had sacrificed for me, though never in the way they had for my brother. They'd given him advantages I never had, but still they'd done their best. They'd done what they thought was fair. Was I now supposed to repay that by giving up the life I'd worked so hard to build? I'd worked for so long dreaming of freedom, of breaking the cycle of working just to survive. I dreamed of having time to volunteer, travel, and maybe start a passion project. But now I was asking myself, am I being selfish? My parents raised me, they provided for me, taught me discipline, and encouraged me in their own way, even if it was different than how they treated my brother. Should I give him the leg up he needs simply because he's family? It's a hard choice, and even now, I'm not entirely sure what's right. Update 1. Hello everyone. I wish I could say that things have improved or that we're closer to finding a solution, but unfortunately, the situation has only gotten more frustrating. A lot of you suggested that a one-on-one conversation with my parents might clear the air and help us reach some understanding. So, after that phone call with my dad, I made plans to visit my parents and have an honest, open conversation with them. I wanted to approach it calmly, to see if they could understand my perspective if we spoke face to face. When I arrived, things started off fairly normal. We exchanged the usual pleasantries, and for a brief moment I thought that maybe, just maybe, we could have a rational discussion about this. Eventually, I tried to steer the conversation to the main issue. I told them I understood why they sympathized with my brother and that I could see how, as his parents, they would want to help him. But I also explained how hard I'd worked on my own to reach this point of early retirement. The moment I mentioned that I'd done things on my own, my mom's face immediately changed, and she didn't hesitate to interject. She told me that they'd done their part in raising me, and that, wherever I was in life, it was because of the foundation they provided. Her tone made it sound like I owed everything to them, as if all the years of hard work, the sacrifices I'd made, and the countless hours I'd put in didn't matter because in her eyes, they were the reason I'd succeeded. I tried to clarify that I wasn't disregarding their contribution or the role they played in my early years, but that the last 17 or 18 years were a result of my efforts alone. I explained that I'd given my all to reach this point, and in doing so, I'd neglected other parts of my life, including my marriage. I wanted this break not just for myself, but for my wife too, who had been incredibly patient and supportive throughout my career. But none of my words seemed to resonate with them. Every point I tried to make was met with resistance. They seemed to have an answer for everything, and it was clear that their minds were firmly made up. They suggested I could work a few more years, and then get back to my retirement plans. They made it sound so simple, like a small inconvenience that I could just push aside. But for me, it wasn't just about working a few extra years. I'd already given so much of my life to this goal, and I finally wanted to take a step back and enjoy what I'd worked so hard to build. I was hoping they'd see that, but they didn't. What really stung, though, was when my mom said that if money was such a big issue, my wife could work more. She implied that if we were struggling financially, my wife should step up and take on more work so I'd be free to help my brother. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. It felt like a slap in the face, not just to me but to my wife, who had been a constant support through all of this. The suggestion that she should now bear the financial burden to support my brother felt unfair and honestly, deeply insulting. At that point, I couldn't hold back my frustration. I asked them why they weren't stepping in to help my brother themselves if they were so determined that he needed support. My dad's response was that they would help if they could, but they had debts of their own and couldn't afford it. It was as if they saw me as an extension of themselves, someone who should fulfill their financial obligations when they couldn't. They seemed to feel entitled to my hard-earned money simply because I was their son and I'd managed to build something for myself. The rest of the conversation went nowhere. No matter how hard I tried to explain my position or the sacrifices I'd made to reach this point, it was clear that they weren't willing to see things from my perspective. They kept coming back to the idea that family should help each other, as if I was somehow failing them by refusing to hand over my savings. It was disheartening to realize just how set they were in their beliefs and how little they seemed to appreciate everything I'd done to get here. I left that conversation feeling drained, defeated, and honestly, more confused than ever. For so long, I'd thought my parents were fair, understanding people. I believed that they'd respect my choices, even if they didn't always agree with them. But this conversation showed me a different side of them, one that I'm struggling to reconcile with the parents I thought I knew. It's become clear that they see my achievements as something they're entitled to share in, rather than something I've earned for myself. For now, I think it's best if I step back and try to cool down. This whole experience has been more emotionally draining than I anticipated, and I need some space to process everything. I'm starting to realize that maybe my parents aren't as innocent in all of this as I once thought. Update 2. Unfortunately, things have taken a turn for the worse. I'd hoped that after my last conversation with my parents, we could let things cool down and maybe move past this issue. But it seems they had other plans. Rather than stepping back or trying to understand my perspective, it looks like they've been busy telling their side of the story to everyone in our family. It all came to a head when one of my cousins, who lives not too far from us, decided to pay us a visit. He dropped by under the pretense of a casual check-in, and we made small talk for a while. But then, out of nowhere, he brought up my brother, mentioning how he's having a tough time lately. He then started talking about how if he were in my shoes, he'd do whatever it took to help his sibling. I could tell he was trying to provoke a reaction, but I played it cool, waiting to see what he'd say next. Sensing I wasn't taking the bait, he got a bit more direct. He said that my parents had been telling everyone how hard they worked to raise me, putting all their energy and sacrifices into helping me achieve my dreams, only to end up with nothing in return. According to them, they never asked for much, but when they finally turned to me for help with my brother, I refused. My cousin went on about how they had apparently been telling everyone that my brother didn't get as much as I did growing up, and how in their view, he could use a little support from me. I was stunned. Not only had my parents spread their complaints to our relatives, but they'd also twisted the story, framing themselves as victims of my ingratitude. Apparently, I was the ungrateful son who'd gotten all the benefits and turned my back on my family the moment they needed me. Hearing my cousin say this, I felt a surge of anger, but tried to keep my cool, knowing there was little point in defending myself to someone who already saw me as the villain. He kept going, bringing up how our family always believed in unity and that if I had the means to help, it was my responsibility to do so. I could tell he wasn't interested in my side of the story. He was just echoing what my parents had told him. I tried to steer the conversation away, but he was relentless, making it clear that he, along with several other relatives, believed I was wrong to withhold my success from my brother. And that wasn't even the worst of it. Apparently, my brother had also been telling everyone who would listen about his supposed abandonment. He's been going around saying that he took care of me his whole life, and now when he's struggling, his successful brother has turned his back on him. The way he's painted it, he's the loyal, selfless brother who's been wronged by a sibling who only cares about money. To make matters worse, I've started getting text messages from other relatives who rarely ever reach out. They've been sending me guilt-laden messages about how family should always come first, how we should always help each other. And some even suggested that I take a few years to help my brother and then get back to my retirement plan later. I didn't reply to any of them, but the messages kept coming, each one a painful reminder of just how distorted this whole situation had become. The betrayal I feel goes deep. It's not just about my parents and brother twisting the facts. It's about how they've turned the entire family against me to pressure me into giving up my retirement savings. All the hard work I've done, the years of planning and the sacrifices, none of it seems to matter to them. They don't see the years I spent sacrificing my time, energy, and personal life. All they see is what they feel I owe them and my brother. What hurts the most is that my brother, instead of standing up for the truth, is actively feeding into this narrative. He knows that he's never supported me financially, and he knows that I've achieved everything on my own. But instead of being honest about it, he's happily playing the victim, stirring up pity among our relatives to pressure me into helping him. I honestly thought he'd have more integrity than this, but clearly I was wrong. Meanwhile, my wife has been incredibly supportive, but I can tell that this whole ordeal is taking a toll on her too. She's been my rock, standing by me and offering comfort, but even she's feeling the weight of the situation. My parents' remarks about her working to support my brother really upset her, but she's tried to brush it off. But it's painful for her to see me going through this, especially knowing that the people I trusted most are the ones causing me the most hurt. I feel like I'm stuck in a nightmare where no matter what I do, I'm cast as the villain. If I stand my ground, my family will continue to see me as selfish and ungrateful. But if I give in, I'll be sacrificing everything I've worked so hard to build, not just for myself but for my wife and our future together. It feels like a lose-lose situation, and the pressure is relentless. At this point, I just want this drama to end. The constant guilt-tripping, the messages, the whispers behind my back. It's wearing me down. I've spent years working hard to build a life I'm proud of, and now it feels like my family is trying to tear it all apart. I don't know what else to do, but for now, I think the best thing is to keep my distance from the people who've made it clear they don't have my best interests at heart. Update 3. Hi. First off, I just want to thank each and every one of you for all the responses and support you've shown me. Reading your comments and advice made me realize I wasn't alone in this. And honestly, it kept me grounded through everything. It's comforting to know that so many people have my back. This whole mess with my family has been exhausting, but I felt like I owed you all one last update, so here we go. For a while, I tried my best to ignore all the family drama. I thought maybe if I didn't engage, they'd eventually get the message and stop. I ignored the constant texts and guilt-tripping messages from relatives. But as the days went on, it felt like they were only ramping up. The pressure became unbearable, and I knew I couldn't stay quiet any longer. So I decided to take matters into my own hands. I paid a surprise visit to my parents' place, ready to confront them directly. To my surprise and irritation, my brother was there as well. The moment I walked in, I could see the smug looks on their faces. They were all sitting in the living room looking so self-satisfied, as if they believed I was finally coming around to their demands. They clearly thought I was there to hand over the money they'd been harping on about, and honestly, that assumption alone made my blood boil. Without giving them much of a chance to start their usual lecture, I jumped right in. I told them exactly what I thought about their behavior, and I didn't hold back. I laid it all out, from their manipulative guilt-tripping with the relatives to their ridiculous entitlement over my hard-earned savings. I told them that what they had done with the relatives wasn't just petty. It was ignorant and downright pathetic. I reminded them that whatever support they gave me as a kid was the bare minimum of what any decent parent would do. Every parent is supposed to look out for their child, make sure they're safe, and provide a nurturing environment. That's just the basic responsibility of having kids, not some favor that needs to be repaid. The idea that they sacrificed so much for me felt insulting, especially when they acted like raising me was something exceptional. Then I turned to my brother. He looked uncomfortable, but I didn't let that stop me. I asked him point-blank, when had he ever taken care of me? Was it during all the time he was spending on designer suits, gadgets, and lavish parties? Or maybe when he was blowing through money on trips to Vegas and Miami? I reminded him of the time I had approached him in my 20s with a business idea, looking for just a little support or guidance. He'd scoffed at me then, telling me my dream was too big, and that I'd never pull it off. I'd been hurt then, but I'd taken it as motivation to work even harder. I looked at all three of them and told them that this entire situation wasn't my fault. My parents had decided to send my brother to an extremely expensive private school, knowing full well the financial strain it would put on them. I wasn't the one pushing them into debt. It was his recklessness that had put them in this mess. My parents had enabled his lifestyle, and now that he'd bit off more than he could chew, they wanted me to clean up his mess. I told them that their so-called golden child had made his choices, and he'd have to live with the consequences. If they'd come to me with kindness and respect, maybe even asked for a loan, I might have considered it. But to demand my savings as if they owned me or had some right to the life I've built. Not a single chance. At this point, my mom and my brother started shedding tears, acting like they were devastated by my refusal to help the family. My mom went on about how they never meant to offend me, and that they just needed my support. She kept calling my brother a failed prodigy who just needed a little help to get back on his feet, as if that would justify everything they'd done. Watching them, I realized just how manipulative they'd become. My mom's pleas, my brother's sob story. It was all an act, a way to guilt me into giving them what they wanted. The whole thing felt like a sad, rehearsed script. It was clear they had no remorse for how they treated me, only regret that their scheme hadn't worked out as they'd hoped. I didn't waste another minute there. I told them one last time that I wouldn't be giving them or my brother a single penny, that they'd made their bed and would have to lie in it. Then I walked out and didn't look back. I knew I'd made the right choice, but the experience still left a bitter taste in my mouth. It was heartbreaking to realize that my own family could stoop so low. Since that day, I've completely cut them off. I blocked my parents, my brother, and all the relatives who had sided with them or tried to guilt-trip me. Some of them eventually got word of what happened and reached out to apologize, but by then, it was too little, too late. I didn't need their apologies or empty words. I needed peace, and that meant moving forward without them in my life. My wife has been incredible through all of this. We both knew we needed some time away to clear our heads, so we decided to take a little getaway. We've been relaxing, enjoying each other's company, and just soaking up the relief of finally being free from all that toxic drama. I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders, and for the first time in weeks, I feel genuinely at peace. Looking back, I don't regret my decision one bit. My parents and brother made their choices, and I've made mine. I won't be guilt or manipulated into giving up the life I've worked so hard to build, especially not for people who see me as nothing more than a source of cash. My wife and I are focusing on our future now, and I'm incredibly grateful to have someone by my side who truly cares about me rather than what I can give them. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Stepmom framed me for stealing her jewelry, so my dad gave her my college fund, and my whole family abandoned me. Now they've found out the truth and want me back. 5 years ago, I, 23F, was accused of theft by my stepmom, Chloe, and because of that, literally my entire family ostracized me. They didn't just cut me off. My dad even took away my education fund to give it to that liar, so I had to start working instead. The backstory is that Chloe already didn't like me. A couple of days after she married my dad, she accused me of stealing her jewelry box and selling everything. She planted some evidence here and there as well, like a few of the missing items in my room at my dad's house, then a couple of receipts in my purse and stuff like that. It was very well thought out and executed and definitely not a spur-of-the-moment decision. I know for a fact that she herself had sold her jewelry just to frame me, but nobody believed me. I tried to explain to my family that I hadn't done anything and that she was lying, but there was just no point. They cut me off, humiliated me completely, and pretty much just ruined my mental health with their accusations. They haven't spoken to me in the past 5 years, but all of a sudden, now that they know the truth, they want to mend their ways and want me to give them a second chance. Even my biological mother, who had literally raised me for the most part since after her divorce from my dad, who had become my primary custodial parent, didn't believe me. She had also cut me off back then, and now she wants to talk to me, but I don't want to speak to them. I don't want to interact with any of them right now, and I've been very clear about it. I feel like I'm finally doing well for myself. I have a stable career, and I'm not depressed anymore like I was for the past couple of years. So the last thing that I want is my family back in my life. But my mom has told me that back then, because of all the evidence that was there against me, they had no option but to believe Chloe, so I can't hold that against them, and I need to forgive them so we can reconcile as a family. I don't feel the same way about the situation, though, so AITA for not wanting to reconcile with my family? Edit. Hey, I'm sorry guys, but I really don't know how they figured out the truth all of a sudden. I haven't even asked them about it because I know that it's going to require me to actually talk to them so I can get to the bottom of this, and I don't think that I'm in the right headspace for that right now. I just want to focus on my work and myself, and that's it. I don't want to do anything to do with my family, at least not at the moment. Update 1. Hi, so I reached back out to my mom, and I told her that my decision was final. I did not want to speak to her right now, nor did I want to speak to anybody else from the family, so all of them needed to stop contacting me. So far, they had been texting and calling me, and just because I was a bit confused about whether I was doing the right thing or not, I hadn't blocked them. But now that I was sure that I didn't have to talk to them if I didn't want to, I just went ahead and blocked them. It really feels like a huge headache has gone away because lately, I've been feeling really guilty about not wanting to talk to them. I kept thinking about what my mom had said. The fact that given the circumstances of my strained relationship with Chloe combined with the so-called evidence that they had found, it felt like she must have been telling the truth. And I thought about things from their point of view, and I don't know why I started to think that maybe if I had been in their place, I wouldn't have believed myself either. But then, they knew me as a person. They had literally raised me and known me from when I was a child. So as my family, they should have believed me. They should have known better. I was torn between these two perspectives, but at the end of the day, I'll do what I want to do. If I don't want to speak with them right now, I'm not obliged to do so just because they feel bad about whatever happened in the past. They had 5 years to figure out stuff for themselves. But they didn't. They didn't even try. And even now, they wouldn't have found out about the truth had my father not stumbled upon it completely by accident. So, yes, I finally did end up asking my mom how they found out the truth before I blocked her because I was really curious, and she told me that a couple of days before they all reached out to me, my dad had been using Chloe's laptop for some work since his own wasn't working, and he had to give it up for repair. While working, he accidentally opened her email instead of his. But before switching accounts, he noticed that she had a new email talking about some unsold jewelry. Curiosity got the better of him, and he decided to check that email, and unfortunately for Chloe, it was an email from the guy that she had actually sold all her jewelry to. Apparently, there was this last item, a pair of gold earrings that he had purchased from her, but since they were really pretty, He hadn't had the heart to have them melted and made into anything else because the craftsmanship on that pair was excellent. But now, 5 years had passed, and neither had he sold those earrings nor had he done anything with them. He was retiring, so he was going to be closing shop, and he wanted to know if Chloe wanted to buy those earrings back. He had even attached a picture of those earrings, and my dad recognized them because, of course, she had made such a hue and cry about all the jewelry that apparently I had stolen and sold that my family was bound to remember every single one of them. Then it was not that difficult for my dad to put 2 and 2 together, and then he confronted Chloe. She tried to deny everything at first, but then she started crying about how I had always hated her. And she knew that if I had continued to be a part of their life, I would have definitely tried to ruin their marriage at some point. She told my dad that she recognized me for what I really was, a blood vampire for my dad's money, and she didn't want me to ruin his life, so she decided to drive me away. She tried to make it sound like it was something that she had done for my dad's own good. But now that the truth was out, there was no fooling him anymore. He kicked her out of the house because even if we humored whatever she had said in her defense, that she thought I was constantly trying to get my dad to spend money on me, it still didn't make sense for her to accept my education fund. Also, it was a pretty stupid defense to try and make me look like a gold digger when I'm literally my dad's only daughter, and I didn't even ask him for more money than he already paid for in child support. The only thing that I had ever really expected from my dad was for him to cover my college tuition because I planned on going to college out of state, and I knew that it was going to be expensive. I didn't want to work alongside college because it would get too hectic and stressful, and the degree that I was aiming for was quite hard anyway. I knew that my dad made enough money, so it would not be a big deal for him, and I didn't want to rely on my mom because at the time, she was planning on starting her own business. I don't understand how any of this was going to make me look like a gold digger, especially when the person who was accusing me of being a gold digger was actually the biggest gold digger herself. Chloe literally quit her job a week after she got engaged to my dad. Then she framed me for stealing all her jewelry and selling it even though I know for a fact that she herself had done it. And she already had the money from that, which must have been quite a lot because from what I know, it had all been her mom's jewelry, and not only was it beautiful, it was all expensive-looking stuff as well. Then, after the whole fiasco with me, I know for a fact that she accepted my education fund money from my dad, which he decided to use to apologize for my behavior. What she eventually ended up doing with all that money, I don't know. But the fact of the matter is that if you're talking about who is a gold digger in the true sense of the word, I don't think I can beat Chloe. Anyway, her defense made no sense, and my dad was able to see through it. So he kicked her out of the house, and from what I have been told by my mom, she is staying with her dad right now and begging my father to take her back every day. But he has already filed for a divorce. My problem is that they had 5 years to look into this, but they believed Chloe blindly. Even my own mom, who knew exactly what kind of problems I had with Chloe, didn't take my side when it was time. She of all people should have known that I was not a thief. So all these apologies really don't mean anything to me anymore. The bottom line is that they gave away my college fund to a liar, and even now, they wouldn't have found out about the truth if my dad hadn't accidentally opened her emails. They were so trusting of her that they didn't even think this was worth looking into or investigating at a deeper level. They just took her word for it and kicked me out of the family. After that, they never even bothered to check up on me. I had to look out for myself, and I was completely on my own, and let me just tell you, even though what 18 people do consider you an adult, I was inexperienced and young and broke. So I felt just as lost as I would have if I had been any younger. It was one of the most difficult times for me, and I don't think I would have survived by myself had it not been for my friends. They couldn't afford to pay for me to go to college even though I did get into my top choice because it would be very expensive, and their parents were already funding their education, and I didn't want to rely on them like that or burden them by asking them to co-sign student loans for me either, especially when I was already sleeping on their couches. But thankfully, one of my friends had already decided to take a gap year and work for his dad, so he got me in as well, and I started earning, and soon enough, I had saved up enough money to rent an apartment and start living on my own. Since then, I have continued to work really hard and diligently, and I'm even in talks for yet another promotion in a couple of months. I accomplished all of this on my own without any help or moral support from my family, so I don't think that I owe it to them to talk to them just because they have finally realized that they were wrong. If they had just believed me back then, I wouldn't even have been in this position right now. I probably would have been doing way better. I would have been able to go to the college of my choice and work in companies of my choice. I'm not saying that I'm not grateful for what I have right now, but knowing that this is not my full potential, that just hurts. I don't think that I'll ever be able to bring myself to forgive them for what they did, and I don't think that I have to forgive them either. Just because they are sorry now doesn't mean that I'm obliged to let everything go all of a sudden. Now, if at any point in time I do feel like I want to forgive them, then I might. If I don't, then I won't, and I refuse to feel bad for it either. My mom has no right to make me feel guilty for not wanting to reconcile with them, especially when she herself didn't feel guilty for cutting me off so abruptly. She knew that I didn't get along with Chloe. She knew that Chloe had every reason to frame me, but even then, she chose to believe the woman over me. I'm not even kidding. For years after getting kicked out, I kept trying to figure out why exactly these people believed her over me, especially when I had never lied in my life. All my life I had always tried to be a good kid and a good daughter to my parents, and yet that hadn't been enough. But when it came down to it, they believed some random loser woman who just happened to be married to my dad over me. And yes, even if I think about the fact that there was some evidence against me that Chloe had very cleverly arranged, they still didn't have enough reason to believe her. After all the proof that she had arranged, it would have been very easy for her to frame me, especially when I was not even aware of what she was trying to do behind my back, and I was not on alert if I'm going to be using that language. All the evidence was circumstantial, and if Chloe had actually been so sure of the fact that I had stolen and sold everything, then she should have gone to the cops. I had suggested it a couple of times myself back when everything was happening, but it was my family who had stopped that from taking place, probably because they were too worried about the family reputation just in case I did turn out to be a thief. That's how low their confidence in me actually was. And the more that I think about this situation, the angrier I feel. So whatever. I think that they messed up, and now they're just going to have to live with it. Update 2. Hey, so I blocked my family a couple of days ago. For the record, they had already been blocked for a really long time. They had just managed to find out my new contact info from other people. I don't know who exactly gave it out. I'm guessing some cousins or maybe friends. But regardless of the situation, they decided to contact me again, and this time they wrote me an email collectively, saying that they were all really sorry for their behavior for the past 5 years and that they should have believed me instead of kicking me out like that. They told me that they really wanted to meet me and set things right again, and even if we don't end up reconciling immediately, they think it's worth it to at least give it a chance. I don't know what to say to them, so I just ignored that email. I have spoken to a couple of my close friends about this, and they think that I don't have to speak to them if I don't want to, just like everyone else, especially given that it's taken me a really long time to get over whatever has happened. Like I had mentioned in my last update, I had been depressed for a very long time, and now I'm finally doing better after a lot of therapy and working on myself. I don't want to ruin all that hard work, so I really want to stay away from them. But at the same time, I really also want to give them a piece of my mind because it's been 5 years, and I feel tempted to let them know exactly how I feel about them. I can still deal with the fact that my dad and my paternal grandparents are delusional enough to believe that they still have a chance, but it's my mom that I'm really upset about. Even back when everything was going wrong, I had expected her to be in my corner, but she had also turned her back on me. So more than anybody else, I want to let her know that she really let me down. She should have stood up for me. I really want to tell her that, but then that's going to mean that I have to talk to them. In my past few interactions with them recently, I've been polite enough, but now they're beginning to get on my nerves, and I feel like if they continue bothering me like this, I'm going to snap eventually, and I really don't want to do that. It's taking me a really long time to get to where I am today, be it emotionally or financially, and I don't want them to ruin it for me. But I think that if they send another email after this, then I might definitely snap at them. Now also, now that that's out of the way, I feel like I haven't really mentioned why I didn't get along with Chloe. A lot of people have been asking me how our relationship actually began and how it ever even came to a point like that. So I feel like I have to say that even though our relationship had never been good in the first place, I never expected her to do something like that because that's actually insane. Anyway, when my father started dating her, I already didn't like her much because I found her to be very pretentious, and I don't know, her vibes were just very weird from the beginning. I just tried to avoid her, and she would do the same for me, so it's not like we had much of a relationship in the beginning. But then, slowly as her relationship with my dad got serious, she started trying to boss me around. She started trying to control me, and I wouldn't listen to her because I really didn't feel like I had to. She would manipulate my dad into trying to get me to follow her ways, and they were little things, but it still felt pretty bad because she was trying to control the way that I dressed, the things that I ate, and even the times when I went out. At one point, it got too much for me, so I told her that I knew what she was trying to do. I knew that she was trying to act like she was my mother, but at the end of the day, the fact remains that she's really not my mother. I actually have a mom. I don't need her to be a second one. So I would really appreciate it if she stopped interfering in my life. She could marry my dad if she wanted to, I didn't have a problem with that, but I don't have to feel the same way that I treat my mom, and I really don't have to be obedient to her. I didn't fight with her or anything, just put her in her place. And since then, she started disliking me. She never told my father about it, but I guess she was just gearing up for this one big move after her marriage, and she was successful in fooling my family. Now that I think back on it, I'm pretty sure that there was something very wrong with her because I can't imagine a grown woman having such a full-blown beef with a teenager and then actually doing something so horrible to them just to get back at them for putting them in their place. Anyway, that's the kind of person that my family chose to believe over me, and it's not like I didn't bring this up with them in my defense. I did try to tell them that she had it in for me right from the first instance and that she was probably trying to frame me, but they didn't believe me. They thought that I was crazy, and I was just trying to shift the blame onto her because I was too ashamed of myself. Actually, I'm too ashamed of my family because I have to be associated with idiots. Now I really hope that they don't contact me anymore and just take the hint. Update 3. So unfortunately, my mom decided to show up at my house today. She told me that one of my cousins told her the address, which I think is really out of line because she was a person I actually trusted in the past 5 years, and she knew that I didn't want my mom to show up. So this was a huge breach of my privacy, but I'll deal with that later. Right now, I feel like I just have to talk about what went down with my mom. When she showed up a couple of hours ago in the evening, I was very tired from a long day at work, so I told her to go away because I really didn't want to talk to her. But she stood her ground, and she told me that she was not going anywhere until she spoke to me because 5 years had already passed since she had made that huge mistake, and she was not making another one by leaving right now because she had been trying to talk to me for a long time now, and it was about time that I heard her out. I didn't want to create drama, so I just let her in because I thought that I could get it over with. When she was inside, she hugged me. She started crying and told me that she was really sorry about everything that she had done. She said that she had just been very taken aback by everything that Chloe had accused me of, and because of all the evidence, she had actually started to believe that maybe Chloe was telling us the truth. Then she told me that after I had been kicked out of the family, she had thought about getting in touch with me several times, but then she thought that I needed to learn my lesson and start being disciplined. Only now, after she had found out the truth, did she realize that she had made a huge mistake, and she just wanted to make up for it because I was her only daughter. She didn't think she could afford to lose me, and she said that she knew that deep down I felt the same way about her, that I didn't want to lose her either. So I told her that in the beginning maybe I did feel the same way, that I didn't want to lose my mom, but in the past 5 years I've learned to live without my family, and now it really makes no difference to me anymore. Then she started crying, telling me that she knew that I was only saying this out of anger, and I had every right to be angry because after all, she had really let me down. But then she knew that it was not the truth. She continued to hug me and kept crying, but I told her that now that I had given her an opportunity to talk to me, I really needed her to leave because I wanted to relax after work. Then she started getting upset. She told me that it had taken her a lot of convincing for my cousin to give out my contact info and my address, and she knew that I was upset with her, but there was still no reason to be so rude to her. At that point, I finally just lost it, and I told her that she and her ex-husband had pretty much ruined my entire life. If she had just stood by my side and told my dad that I was telling the truth, then there might have been a proper investigation into the whole thing, and they would have found out that Chloe had been lying all along. That way, I would have been able to go to college, and I would have been able to have the life that I wanted for myself without having to struggle so much. So just because of her decision not to believe me, my entire life had been turned upside down. Whether she liked it or not, I did not want to talk to her anymore, at least not at the moment, and if I did want to reconcile with them at any point, I would come to them myself. But for now, she would just have to deal with the fact that I didn't want to see her and just get out of my house. I was very upset, so I yelled at her, and she seemed shocked. But then she recovered, and she told me that she could understand that I was very upset, and she would come back later, but I had really hurt her. I couldn't care less about that, though. I just told her that I wanted her to leave, and eventually, she did go away. To be very honest, at this point, their apologies don't really mean anything to me. Whatever damage had to be done, it's already been done, and them saying sorry is not going to take it back. I just want to move on with my life. I already have moved on with my life halfway. What I needed was some closure, and I think that I received that as well. So right now, I just really want to be done with this whole thing, and I hope that she doesn't come back anytime soon because I feel like I've already had a lot of stress and anxiety to deal with the past couple of days. I don't need any more of that anymore. Update 4. Hi. So it's been 3 weeks since my last update, and since then, my family hasn't gotten in touch with me except for sending me an email around last week. Yet again, it was a collective email from my parents and my paternal grandparents, telling me that they were really sorry about everything that had happened and would continue to be sorry for the rest of their lives if that's what it takes for me to forgive them. They had heard about my interaction with my mom, and they know that I don't want to right now, so they will stay away from me, but they really hope that at some point in time, I'll be able to forgive them and I will try to reconcile with them myself. They also told me that my father, even though he didn't show himself, is more apologetic than anybody else because he thinks that all of this could have been avoided if he had just trusted me instead of his wife. He also apologized to me for screwing up my chances at college and told me that he was willing to write me a check so that at least now I can go to college, but I don't feel like taking money from him right now, so I have decided to pass up on that, at least for now. In the future, I might forgive them, but I might not. I don't really know because I haven't made up my mind since this is a very complicated situation. However, for now, I'm very content with my life as it is, so I don't want to bring about any new changes. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My adoptive daughter had her bio dad walk her down the aisle and I found out my wife was having an affair with him. Hi guys, so recently I found out that my wife had been cheating on me, and my adoptive daughter had known about it for the past couple of years. Both of them had betrayed me. My soon-to-be ex-wife, Taylor, 57F, and I, 58M, have been together for almost 30 years and married for 25, having met in our college days. We also adopted a daughter together a few years after our marriage, Emily, 22F. Taylor and I had been trying to get pregnant for quite some time, but were struggling with fertility issues. So when one of our common friends approached us to ask if we would be willing to adopt his kid, we agreed. This friend, Jackson, 58M, was someone we had met in college. Back then, he was your typical trust fund frat boy. After graduation, we didn't exactly stay in touch but would occasionally meet on the birthdays of our other friends. Then one year, he reached out to us out of the blue and told us that he had heard from a couple of people that we had been struggling with infertility. He said it was none of his business, but he thought he had the perfect solution to both our problems. He told me that he had accidentally gotten one of his girlfriends pregnant, and neither of them wanted to keep the baby. Naturally, they had thought about putting the baby up for adoption, but after he heard about my wife and I wanting to have a baby of our own, he decided to reach out to us. That way, he wouldn't have to go through the trouble of contacting any agency and waiting and stuff. By then, it had been slightly over a year that Taylor and I had been trying to get pregnant and hadn't had any luck. After discussing it with her, we decided to go ahead with the adoption because it was the best option for all of us. Even before Emily was born, we had all the legal paperwork done. After she was born, her biological parents would only remain in touch with us for a couple of months before starting to fade out of her life. It was an open adoption, and we had to reassure them that they were free to visit or contact Emily if they wanted to, but they only bothered to visit her for a couple of months after she was born. They broke up and stopped coming over, and we were fine with it. Emily's biological mother moved away and never reached out to us again. We went back to having minimal contact with Jackson until Emily turned 3 years old. After that, even Jackson had no contact with us anymore. To be fair, after that, he didn't have any contact with anybody, and it was like he totally disappeared. From what I had heard, his father had suffered some serious losses in business and had to sell their company and a lot more. So even they had to relocate because they couldn't start fresh there. For almost 13 years, we did not hear from Jackson. He reached out to us a couple of weeks before Emily's 16th birthday. That was 6 years back, and I remember he had sent us an email telling us that he was finally back in town and was starting a new restaurant of his own, and that he wanted to meet us and Emily. I was a bit skeptical about it because, honestly, This guy had not been in touch with us for the past 13 years, and now all of a sudden, he wanted to reconnect with us and our daughter. It was a bit too sudden. He hadn't even told us what he had been up to in the past decade, just that he was back and wanted to meet us. So I was unsure of whether we should give him a chance or not, but after speaking to Taylor, we decided to meet him without Emily first. When we met for the first time after all those years, he finally told us what he had been up to, and it was actually quite sad. Before his dad's company started failing, he had been a total brat, and I suppose most of you guys are aware of how stereotypical rich trust fund kids usually behave. While the rest of us had started working after graduating from college, he was still not really serious about life and was living in easy mode, partying every weekend and hooking up with every other girl. He did have a position in his dad's company, but it was only a nominal one, and it was not like he actually had to do any work for it. So things were pretty simple for him. However, after they moved away, he had to start afresh and actually start taking things seriously. He had to start applying for jobs. Unfortunately, since neither his grades were any good nor did he have any experience in the real world, it was very difficult for him to find anything that he wanted to do. His parents were also struggling to cope with the loss of everything that they had known and would constantly be fighting with each other at home. It was with great difficulty that his family had managed to get one of their relatives to help them out and let them stay with him. His father had started working under his uncle, continuing the legacy of their family business, which he had left earlier. His dad didn't like it one bit since he didn't like taking orders from anyone, which is why he hadn't joined the family business in the first place, but he had to be thankful to his brother for allowing him a place in their home and business. So all the bitterness and frustration inside him, he would take it out on his wife and his son. Within a year, it became absolutely impossible for him to continue living with his family, and he decided to take a low-paying clerical job so he would have some money of his own and would be able to move out. Unfortunately, moving out was not the upgrade that he thought it was, because with the money that he had, he could only afford to live in a tiny little apartment with a bunch of roommates. He just kept thinking about his life and how humiliating it was for him to be living like this right now, and that pushed him into depression. He tried to keep in touch with his family, but he was so bitter about everything that eventually he decided to go no contact with them. Things just kept getting worse for him mentally, and after a few years he started developing alcoholism, and eventually that led to drugs. During that time, he kept getting fired and jumped from one job to another, but made sure that he had enough money to pay for his addictions. At one point, he decided to skip paying rent and was evicted, so he ended up homeless, but he still made sure that he had enough money for his other priorities. Thankfully, he was found by one of his uncle's neighbors, and they brought him back to his family, who helped him clean up his act. They had him sent to rehab and stuff, and he had been clean for 2 years by the time he finally came back here. His uncle had put him in touch with a few investors, and he had some savings of his own as well, so he came back here with an intention to be better this time around. He wanted to start by setting things right with us because he thought that he had kind of abandoned us. Even though he had put Emily up for adoption, he had promised that he would try to be part of her life, and now he wanted to at least be able to give himself a chance to live up to that promise that he'd made. That's why he wanted us to let Emily meet him, and then that was another discussion altogether because I remember that Taylor was all for it, but I was still not on board with it because it would be too much of a shock for Emily. She knew that she was adopted, but I didn't want to push her into a weird situation by introducing her biological father into her life after she hadn't known him even in the slightest for all those years that he had been missing. So my wife and I decided that we were going to ask her, and only then would we go ahead with reintroducing Jackson into her life again. When we spoke to Emily, I tried to keep things neutral, but Taylor decided to take a different approach and made it sound like Jackson had been through a lot of stuff, and now only having her in his life would make it better. I thought it was a bit manipulative, but Taylor told me that she was only being honest with Emily, and that she deserved to know everything about why her biological father had not been in his life for the past 13 years, so she could make an informed decision. Anyway, eventually Emily decided to meet him, and I still regret allowing that to happen. They did get along well, and for a couple of years initially things were going great, but then unfortunately the pandemic happened, and he had to shut his restaurant down. It was incredibly sad because that restaurant was supposed to be his dad's way to get back on top since they had been throwing around the idea of running the restaurant together as partners, and with his father's business expertise, they would be able to get back to their former life once again and wouldn't have to rely on his uncle anymore. Even after the pandemic, he wasn't exactly able to get things back on track with his restaurant, and that's when he started hitting the bottles around 3 years ago. Personally, I feel like he just stopped putting in an effort because he had been quite depressed during the pandemic and had been struggling with money, but refused to take any help from us. After the restrictions were lifted, it was like he had lost the will to do anything at all and just kept drinking all day. Whatever little money he made from the restaurant, it was enough to just keep him going and pay for his living expenses, but that was about it. We tried to help him through it, but I don't think he was interested in getting any help. He just wanted to keep drinking, and I started to think of him as a very deadbeat kind of person because even though he had friends willing to help him and the support of his family, it was like he had given up on himself, and you can't do anything with people like that. On top of that, it was even more annoying for me that Taylor and Emily constantly kept pitying him as if he was not a man who had given up anyway. I couldn't exactly say anything about it because Jackson was already going through so much. I didn't want to be cruel. Taylor and Emily kept in touch with him, and occasionally Taylor would even help him out with money since in recent years it had become very apparent that he was struggling as he had to move to a really small apartment as well. Emily also took care of him, and we visited him occasionally since he was never in a condition to come visit us. I thought we could do without these visits as well since it was all quite depressing, but they thought that it would be quite heartless of us to do so, so it was obvious that we had wildly differing opinions on the entire situation. This was how it had been for the past couple of years, and then recently, earlier this year, Emily got engaged to her high school sweetheart and it brought all of us together. We were all equally excited for it, but things kind of went sour for me when at the engagement party, Emily decided to publicly ask my wife and her biological father to walk her down the aisle. Obviously, Taylor and Jackson were overjoyed, but most people just noticed me being completely thrown off by this decision since I had been totally blindsided. I knew that she had a soft spot for Jackson because he had been through a lot in his life, but ultimately, I was her father. I was the person who had actually raised her, and I had assumed that I would be the one to walk her down the aisle. It had always been a dream of mine, so when she did not ask me, I was quite shocked. Later on, she explained to me that the only reason she had asked Jackson and not me was because she felt like it would do a lot of good for him and probably keep him off the drinks. Around that time, I was not happy with this decision at all, but it was her wedding and her choice, so I had to accept it without a fuss. She had also told me that no matter who she asked to walk her down the aisle, her real father was always going to be me, so it didn't matter. But the thing is, it did matter, and it kept eating away at me for the past couple of months because I just kept trying to figure out what I had done wrong. Then I coincidentally found out about it a couple of days ago when I had come back home early from a business trip to surprise Taylor. I was supposed to be gone for 3 days, but I came back home on the evening of the second day and made sure that I was as silent as possible with the house keys and stuff and tiptoed to Taylor's room to surprise her. But then I heard Emily's voice in the room and they were talking about me, so I couldn't help but eavesdrop on them. I'm very glad that I did because otherwise I don't think I would have ever been able to figure out what exactly had been going on. And by the time that I did, it would have been too late. They were talking about the wedding, obviously, and Taylor was telling Emily that she was glad that she had made the right choice by choosing her real family to walk her down the aisle and was congratulating her. I was very confused as to what that comment meant, but then I figured it out soon enough since the rest of the conversation was just Emily telling her mother that she wasn't happy about lying to me for the past 3 years, but they had put her in a very difficult position and that's why she had to do this. I eavesdropped on their conversation for about 10 minutes, and I was able to figure out that Taylor had been cheating on me with Jackson for the past 4 years, and for the past 3 years, Emily had known about it after she had caught them together at some point. But the two of them had teamed up, and in order to prevent Emily from telling me, they had been bribing her with the promise of funding her business, no questions asked. I had always promised Emily that I would pay for her college education and her wedding, but after that, she was on her own since her mother, and I also needed to save for our retirement. We would definitely invest at some point, but she had to get her business started on her own. That was the deal. Taylor knew about it and was on board with it, so the plan was that Emily would work for other companies and get experience, and once she had enough capital and a business model, she would start approaching investors and get started with her business. She had always wanted to do something related to fashion, so that was the way she was going. In the past couple of months, she had mentioned several times that she planned on starting her business after her honeymoon. I was kind of worried about where she was going to get that kind of money from because she had only been working for 1 year and I didn't think it was long enough to have either experience or money. But after overhearing the conversation, I figured that it was probably Taylor who was going to help her out in the future. From what I know, after the honeymoon, Taylor is going to invest in the business that Emily is starting, and that's what they had been discussing for the most part. I still have no idea what part Jackson has to play in all of this because from what I know, he's a deadbeat guy and does not have any money of his own. I guess the fact that he is like that is pathetic enough for Emily to keep their secret, but after I overheard the conversation, I was devastated. I just tiptoed back out of the house and into my car so I could drive away. I was a mess after that because I had no idea how to deal with this or even process any of this, and I just kept driving for a while until I got to a hotel. Once I was there, I did something very impulsive. I started calling up all the wedding vendors whom I was supposed to pay. The wedding is 3 months away, and I had to start securing the deposits for the decor, florists, and a couple of other vendors. The groom's family and I were splitting the cost of the venue and catering, and according to the contract, we couldn't get that money back. But before I made any other payments, I decided to cancel their deals altogether because I was pulling out all the finances from the wedding. Since it was quite obvious that Taylor had been promising to fund Emily's dreams, she could fund this one as well. After speaking to the vendors and telling them that they need not contact me for the money because I was out, I decided to put up a post because I felt like this was something that everybody needed to know. I typed out a really long post with the details of everything that I had just found out and spoke about how betrayed I had been feeling, not just by my wife and my daughter, but also by Jackson, who I had thought of as a friend. All three of them had broken my heart, especially Taylor and most of all Emily. And now I didn't want anything to do with them anymore because it was very obvious to me that this was never my family. The real family was Taylor, Jackson, and Emily. It didn't matter that I had raised her loyalties were elsewhere. I ended up breaking down while posting it, and because I knew that the post would create quite a stir on social media, I decided to immediately put my phone on silent and try and just go to sleep so I wouldn't have to think about any of this. Unfortunately, when I woke up in the middle of the night, it wasn't like waking up from a nightmare because it was all still very much real and was actually happening to me. When I checked my phone after I woke up, almost 3 hours after I posted, I saw that several people from the family had commented on the post and told me to be strong, and I really appreciated that. I also noticed that Taylor and Emily had been calling me nonstop after the post, messaging me to call them back and that they were really sorry that I had to find out this way. They wanted me to just come back to them and speak to them so they would be able to explain themselves because they felt like they owed it to me, and they did. But I was in no mood to speak to them or interact with them in any way whatsoever, so they could keep blowing up my phone. I wasn't going to respond. After I had checked my phone, I realized that I hadn't received any word from Jackson, probably because he had nothing to say, and that was fair enough because we were just friends. He didn't owe me anything as much as my family did. But then things got worse the next day. When I woke up around noon, I noticed that Taylor had stopped calling me, but Emily was still trying to get in touch with me, and she wasn't apologizing and telling me to come back home in her messages anymore. She was telling me that I had ruined everything for her. I didn't understand what that meant until she sent me a message saying that her fiancé had decided to call off the wedding after confronting her about the post since he had read it and realized that Emily had been covering up for her mother's affair for the past 3 years just so she could fund her business in the future. He thought that it was greedy and unethical and he was disgusted by her, which I don't really blame him for. On top of that, it had been made worse by the fact that she had even chosen Jackson and her mother to walk her down the aisle on the day of her wedding. And now he finally understood why, since she wanted her mother and couldn't care less about me even though Jackson hadn't been the one to raise her. I had mentioned it earlier, her fiancé was her high school sweetheart and had known our family for a really long time. So he had also known me for a really long time, and he was perhaps one of the only people who genuinely knew how hurt I was when Emily picked Jackson to walk her down the aisle instead of me and had actually even comforted me. It wasn't surprising that he had taken such a strong stand for my sake and called off the wedding altogether, and I was actually quite grateful for it. I thought that it was karma and she could keep blowing up my phone, but it was not going to change what had happened, so I decided to ignore it. Since that day, my phone has been flooded with messages from everyone that I know. Most people have sent supportive messages, and some of them have told me that there was no need for me to talk about all of this on a public platform because it's still my wife and daughter that I'm talking about, and they're going to be at the receiving end of all the heat. These people were mostly from my in-laws' family. I had made that post almost 3 days ago, and Emily stopped texting me and trying to reach out to me on the second day. I have been feeling quite good about what I had done until a couple of hours ago when I received a message from Emily saying that she was really sorry about everything, but most of all she was sorry about the fact that she had a screwed-up family like this because we had ruined everything for her. Her fiancé had apparently left home after confronting her about the post and blocked her everywhere. So now there was no wedding happening and she was completely on her own. I felt kind of bad for her because I knew that she really loved her fiancé. They had been together for a very long time, and now it was all gone. I guess she understood what I was feeling right now, and I know it can't be good. So, am I the a-hole for posting about how my wife had been having an affair and my daughter had been covering it up? Update 1. Hey! Thank you so much for the support. Yes, I have spoken to a lawyer, and he is in the process of filing for divorce on my behalf right now. It has been a really tough 6 days since I discovered what had been happening in my family, and I'm still trying to process all of it. I'm staying in the hotel. I haven't even gone back to get any extra clothes. It's just not worth it. My parents are also now aware of what had been happening in the family behind my back, and they have also completely cut off Taylor and Emily, even though it was particularly hard for them to cut Emily off since she's their granddaughter. But it had to be done, and it's done now. Also, a lot of you have been asking why exactly I had refused to fund Emily's business in the future, but Taylor agreed. Well, I had refused because I thought that Emily needed to learn to be independent, and also I believe that Taylor and I needed to keep money aside for our retirement as well. But I guess she was desperate to keep the secret of her affair, which is why she had offered to fund the business, and she probably knew that she would be taken care of after she retired either by me since we had a similar kind of income and I was pretty good at saving money, or by whatever her parents left her. Worst case scenario, she would just spend the rest of her life with Jackson. Either way, whatever her reasons were, it was enough for Emily to betray me for some money, and that's what really matters. After she sent that message, I haven't replied to her, and I don't plan on responding to any of them either. They haven't earned it, and I think it's for the best if I stay away from them right now. For them and for me as well. Soon enough, Taylor will be served with the divorce papers, and hopefully we will be able to put an end to this because all I really want to do right now is just move on from this nightmare. Update 2. I finally heard back from Taylor after almost 10 days since I discovered the affair and made that post. A couple of days ago, she was served with the divorce papers, and today she reached out to me. I had blocked my entire family, so she had to create a new email account and send me an email apologizing for everything. She told me that after hearing about how much Jackson had been through, she had developed a bit of a soft spot for him, and before she even knew it, she had started to catch feelings for him. Apparently, she had wanted to tell me about it, but she didn't know how to go about it, and then Emily found out, so she had to bribe her to keep quiet, and things just kept getting messy. She told me that she was really sorry that she had created such a mess, and so was Jackson. The only thing that she could do for me at this point was make sure that the divorce was a smooth process. So, whatever my terms were, she was not going to contest it and would just accept whatever I decided. I guess that's good enough for me because fighting with her is not going to fix our marriage. I'm still really angry about all of this, but I can't do anything anymore except just accept whatever is happening and try to make the best of the situation. I haven't heard back from Emily yet, but from what I know, she and her fiancé have officially broken up because they put out an official statement on social media saying that the wedding had been called off and they had decided to separate. They didn't state any reasons, but anyone with 2 brain cells will be able to put it together. It's really sad, but it cannot be helped now. All that's left to do is finalize my divorce, and I'll be done with this family for good. Update 3. Hi, so it's been 6 months since I filed for a divorce, and 3 weeks ago it came through. I got to keep the house and both our cars, and honestly, those were my only 2 demands. No alimony and no settlement for Taylor. The only money she received was whatever she had been contributing to our joint savings, and that was it. We shut down that account and ended our marriage. There has been very minimal interaction ever since we filed for a divorce, and mostly through our lawyers, and now even that has come to an end. I'm actually relieved since now I can finally try and move on in a real way. I've heard from a couple of people that she has moved in with Jackson and they have sold the restaurant, so I guess they're planning on going back to Jackson's family. Good for them. I think it'll be for the best if they leave. Emily and I have also not been in touch for the past couple of months. Ever since her wedding got canceled, She did reach out to send me an apology through email 2 months ago, telling me that she was going to try and be better. And surprisingly, Taylor actually had lived up to the promise that she had made that she would finance Emily's business. So now that she had money, she was going to start working on a business model and told me that I did not have to forgive her, but nevertheless she was still going to try and be a better person. I wish her all the best. I really do. Now on to the next story. Story 6. My daughter wanted me to sell our family heirloom for college money, but I refused. Then she spread lies about me and almost got taken to see Earth by her grandfather. Hi, I 45F. am writing this post today to seek advice on a situation that happened with my daughter, Chloe, 19F. The problem is pretty messy, so I'll begin with some background to make things clear. I had my daughter, Chloe, when I was 26 with my then husband. We'll call him Stan. Stan and I had met in college and got married when we graduated. He belonged to a business family who was comfortable, to say the least. His mother was a cancer victim and had passed when he was young, with his dad raising him all alone. My father-in-law, Mark, 65, had always treated me like his own daughter and even stood up for me in front of his own family at times. So, after I had Chloe, things got bad between me and Stan, with him barely staying home. When Chloe was 3, we were on the verge of getting divorced, but Mark put us into marriage counseling, and we were able to make it work. But things had changed drastically, feeling fake and like a pretend version of who we were. The time before the divorce had also affected Chloe a lot. So Stan and I decided to be civil to each other and make our marriage work for our daughter. Chloe grew up in a house with a full set of parents who loved her a lot but didn't love each other. Stan was handling his family business and I was working as a graphic designer, both contributing to the household so that Chloe would never feel a day of financial adversity. And she turned out to be a good child, making things work for herself. By the time Chloe turned 17, my and Stan's arrangement had hit a rough patch, with him revealing his affair of 5 years with his secretary. That woman had been with us for almost 10 years, and her backstabbing felt like a betrayal from family. It stirred up a lot of drama at our house, with Mark almost kicking Stan out of his will over his reckless behavior. I decided from that day on to separate from Stan and finally file for a divorce because I was too tired to continue the charade. Chloe didn't say anything, but surely felt the brunt of it because she was the one who had to shift homes every weekend, living mostly with her dad and his side piece after all. His house was closer to the school. I tried to do whatever I could to make it easy for her, from providing her with the best of everything to making sure I wasn't having fights whenever I saw Stan. By the final year of high school, Chloe had decided to get into the family business just like her father and grandfather, and Mark had secretly told me that he was planning on opening a new company under Chloe's name and handing it over to her after she graduated from college. She had worked extremely hard all that school year and was able to get into a decent business school. She wasn't able to get any scholarship or financial aid and was expecting us to pay, which I was willing to do as a parent, by giving half the tuition, with Stan giving the other half. During this time, Stan's side piece had announced her pregnancy. I had started saving up and, after gathering funds from my other savings, I was able to collect the 50%. An incident happened during her final year which led to us having some distance. So, as I mentioned, I had paid extra attention to being there for Chloe after my and Stan's separation. Chloe plays excellent piano and had a talent show for the seniors. It was on a weekday, so both Stan and I had decided to attend. On the day of the event, I got stuck at work due to some reason and called Stan to ask if he was there at Chloe's recital. He told me that he was also with his girlfriend at the hospital because the doctor's visit had taken longer than expected and thought it was okay because I was there. I panicked at the thought and called Mark to ask if he could go to the recital, but he didn't answer his phone as well. Both Stan and I rushed out of our situation as fast as we could and reached by the end of the show. Chloe had won but had no one from her family there, so we found her heading home on her own. When she saw us, she quietly got in the car, and we tried to ask her about it, to which she replied pretty rudely, which was fair. When I was about to drop her and Stan at his house, she made a remark about how it was okay for him to be late because he was looking after the mother of his child, whereas I prioritized work over my child. I was very hurt by this but didn't say anything because I knew this was coming from a place of hurt. I told her I would make it up to her and took her to lunch at her favorite place that weekend, but I don't think things were the same between us after that. After her finals, Chloe came to my house for a long vacation, as my husband's mistress was pregnant and needed more room. One afternoon at lunch, Chloe asked me if I was going to pay for her college so that she could provide me with a detailed list of the expenses. I told her that I was going to pay half the tuition, considering her father was also going to contribute a share. She said that with a new child coming into his family, it was kind of obvious that he wasn't going to pay such a huge amount. I was a little stressed at this and told Chloe that I didn't have that kind of money and that it wasn't fair of Stan to practically throw away his first child just because another one was on the way. She replied that she was okay with her dad not being able to pay and had no grudges against him or his girlfriend, and practically begged me to find a way to help her pay, or she would have to get a student loan. I suggested that the loan was a good idea because we actually lacked funds, but she got upset and left. I think she was expecting me to pay for it all instead of having her take a loan. I thought I should give her the space she needed and didn't initiate a conversation with her for the rest of the day. The next whole morning, Chloe was missing, so I called her and got to know that she was out with a friend and would be home soon. She came back around lunchtime and was looking very excited. When she approached me, I asked her the reason for her happiness, and she proceeded to place this necklace on my table. The necklace she placed was a blue sapphire necklace that belonged to my late mother. We weren't rich or even comfortable back when I was a child, and this pretty expensive necklace, which had been passed down in our family since my great-great-grandma, was considered a lucky charm. I asked Chloe where she found the necklace, and she told me it was in the attic with my mom's other stuff. She said she got the necklace checked by a friend and realized it was valued a lot. She continued that now I could pay her college fees in full by selling this necklace. I was taken aback by her statement because this was something passed on to me and had been in my family for generations, and it felt weird that my own daughter, who was going to inherit this in the future, wanted me to sell it when it wasn't even necessary. I looked at Chloe and how excited she was, but I decided to break her excitement by telling her that there was no way I was going to sell this family heirloom, as it was sentimental. She came up with the argument about it being of no use if it couldn't help her, as she was family, but I very sternly said no to her and wished for no further discussion on this. She got upset and went to her room, and when I went to check in on her, she was packing her bags to stay with her dad. I tried to convince her that it wasn't as big of a deal and that we could find a way out, but she straight up said no and left. Chloe's graduation day was approaching, and I obviously was expecting an invite to her school, but what I received was an invite for the after-party organized at Stan's house. I thought it must have been a mistake and texted Chloe, but she said that the school allowed only one parent and she was going to take her father, which I very half-heartedly accepted. Later on graduation day, I was hurt by Chloe's Instagram post in which she had pictures of her graduation ceremony with Stan and his mistress. I decided to just get through with the day and not make it about myself. The graduation party was very normal, like nothing had happened. Mark did come to console me about Chloe not taking me to her graduation ceremony, but I brushed it off as me being sick and unable to attend. When it was time for the speech, Chloe took center stage and began thanking everyone. She was going on about how her to-be stepmother was a lucky charm and the reason for her success. She kept going on about Stan and his new family, and I thought I would be mentioned somewhere, but the speech ended with nothing about me. I was heartbroken by this, and Mark could see on my face how dejected I was. He immediately went to Chloe to talk to her and left within a few minutes after what looked like a heated argument from afar. Chloe then came to me and asked if we could talk privately, and we both went to her room. I thought she wanted to apologize for everything, but she began screaming and blaming me for ruining her special day because her grandpa Mark had confronted her about not crediting me for her success. And when she told him how he shouldn't interfere when he didn't know the whole story, he replied that he did know everything and stormed out. She kept calling me a tattletale for ratting her out to Mark and spoiling her relationship with him. I told her it wasn't me who told him about our conversation, but she wasn't willing to listen and asked me to leave as soon as I could. I was devastated by it all and left after getting myself together. Later that night, I got a call from Chloe, crying and asking me to come to Stan's house as soon as possible. I got a little tense and drove to his house immediately. I went in and saw Stan, his side piece, and Mark sitting on the couch with Chloe standing by the side in tears. I asked what was going on and got to know that it was Stan who had called Mark the day Chloe went to his house after her fight with me, asking him for either some money for her college or asking him to convince me to pay the full price. Mark got angry at Stan for using me just because he didn't wish to pay for his own daughter and shut him up. Since that day, those two weren't on talking terms, and after Chloe didn't take my name and gave a stupid justification for that, Mark was pushed over the edge and told Chloe something she didn't wish to hear. But first, he asked me to tell him the truth about what had happened between me and Chloe. I told him everything, and he was as appalled as I was at the thought of selling a family heirloom when it wasn't necessary. He then got up and proceeded to berate Chloe for treating me like this and then took out the papers of the company he had planned for Chloe, which was going to be her graduation gift. He told Chloe about it and went ahead to tear it in front of everyone, saying that he was wrong in his judgment of Chloe being a good kid and that there was no way he was going to spoil her with a silver spoon anymore. Everyone was shocked at this, and Chloe began crying hysterically, begging Mark not to be so harsh with her. Mark then turned to me and asked me not to give Chloe the money I had saved for her college, as she needed a reality check after being such an entitled brat, and left without listening to anyone. Chloe then began begging me to convince Mark to give her back the future company, while Stan and his side piece kept blaming me for causing this mess. Everything was too much to take for me, so I told Chloe I would think about it and left to go back to my home. It is now the next morning, and my phone is bombarded with texts from Stan and Chloe asking me to talk to Mark and make things right. I am pretty stressed and I'm thinking of calling Mark for dinner tonight to discuss the issue, but still don't feel it was my fault. So, am I the a-hole for not selling my family heirloom for my daughter's college money and maybe ruining her future? Update 1. Hi. First, I would like to answer some questions asked regarding the original post. Why couldn't Mark pay for Chloe's education? Even though Mark is a rich person, he still believes that people should work and earn their position, so he wasn't willing to pay for Chloe's education per se, but was fine with giving her the company after she had a degree. Stan wasn't as rich as his dad, but was comfortable, as I mentioned, but he was saving his money for his new child and family. About the relationship between Chloe and her future stepmother, Stan's girlfriend, I don't like Stan's side piece because she had done wrong to me, but she has always been nice and kind to Chloe. So far, Chloe didn't like her early on when Stan and I had decided to divorce, but over the last few years, both had bonded over a dysfunctional childhood with separated parents and had developed a mature step-parent-child relationship. I didn't realize how far the extent of their relationship was until now. Coming back to the actual update, so at the dinner I talked to Mark about whatever had gone down and whether such a huge punishment of him not giving Chloe the company, as well as me not paying for her, was fair. Mark made it very clear that there was no way Chloe would have appreciated any of it, and it showed in her behavior at her party. He was disappointed because not only was she acting like she deserved it all, but also didn't even show a tiny bit of intention to make it on her own. He made me realize that I was free to give her the money I had saved for her, but shouldn't expect the same from him, and should not complain in the future just in case Chloe chose to abandon me for her new family. Mark assured me that it wasn't my fault and left. After he left, I called Chloe and let her know that her grandpa wasn't willing to give her a role in the company unless she made something of herself. She freaked out hearing this and began cursing me yet again, blaming me for everything that went wrong. It got so out of hand that Stan had to snatch the phone from her to make her stop. The behavior on this phone has now led to me rethinking my decision to pay half of her college. I got to hear from Mark the next day that he was yet again involved in a huge argument with Stan, who was blaming both Mark and me for making Chloe miserable and treating her so unfairly. Mark, being the bold man he is, reminded Stan that he could pay for his daughter as well but was the real abandoner in the situation. Mark made sure to remind him that he was still a part of the company that Mark headed and could be fired if his stupid blame games didn't stop. Stan shut up pretty quickly after this and barely defended Chloe. Even his mistress tried to convince Mark under the guise of how family should be treated, but Mark asked her to pay for Chloe instead, which she instantly refused to do because she wasn't as well off. I did try to call Chloe after our last chat to check if she was okay, but apparently, I'd been blocked from calls and on all social media, so now I think it makes sense that I don't pay for her college anymore. Update 2. So, it has been a week since the last update, and things have been quiet. I still do feel guilty about not helping my own daughter with her education, but also realized that giving in to her demands would just mean enabling that behavior, so I'm still pretty stuck on not helping her financially. This update is about what happened after. As mentioned before, Chloe was in shambles knowing that she would have to take a student loan and was most probably not going to be a part of the family business. I hear that Stan's girlfriend has been her rock during all this, and as much as I don't like that girl, I'm relieved by the fact that Chloe has someone for emotional support. Mark, after a few days, was also pretty bummed about losing his stepdaughter over money and decided life was too short to hold grudges. He still wasn't going to help her financially or in any way, but wanted to have a talk with her to explain what went wrong and how to fix things for the future with him and me. Chloe agreed to meet him, and they met for lunch, but it didn't go as planned. They talked for a while and things were going smoothly until Mark asked Chloe about why she didn't invite me to her graduation ceremony. Chloe, at this point, in an attempt to persuade her grandpa, made up a whole story about how she had begged me to pay half her tuition and asked about the necklace to make things easy on me, but I instead abused her for being so entitled. She said that after all that, she still invited me to graduation, but I decided to decline the invitation and now was acting like the victim in the situation. Mark is a smart man. He listened to her but decided to cross-check with me later, which is why I know this story. When Mark asked me about declining the invitation, I broke down, thinking how far Chloe had gone just to berate me. I told him the truth and also showed him the chats which Chloe must have forgotten about before lying, making it extremely clear that I wasn't invited to her graduation deliberately. Mark was extremely disappointed at this point and called Chloe to let her know that they wouldn't be having a relationship from now on until she stopped her habit of being deceitful. I also decided to text her from Mark's number that I wanted to be in no contact with an ungrateful child like her. I did get a few texts from Stan's girlfriend calling me names for abandoning my own daughter and ruining her relationship with her family, but I simply blocked her because I know she isn't worth my time. Update 3. I didn't think things would escalate to this level and I would have to write an update this soon. So, after Chloe's conversation with Mark, she realized that the only way to get sympathy in this situation was to come up with a false narrative and spread it. So she used her TikTok account and posted a few videos about how I was a toxic mom, manipulating a lot of situations that had happened since her childhood, making me the villain. She also went as far as to say inappropriate things about my relationship with Mark. I am not on such new social media, so I got wind of the situation from a colleague of mine who was following my daughter. All the limits were crossed at this point, so I decided to inform Mark about it and wrote an email to Stan, his girlfriend, and Chloe, stating that if they don't remove the video as soon as possible, I would sue them for defamation. My colleague assured me that I had nothing to worry about because the post barely had any views. Mark, upon realizing what had gone down, decided to send an email similar to mine to Chloe. Later that evening, I got a call from a distant relative of mine asking me about my situation with Chloe and technically blaming me for not keeping my daughter safe. I asked her how she knew about it, and that's when I got to know that the TikTok had gone viral in our community. I decided to install the app to see what people have been talking about, and my reputation was being torn apart in the comments with Chloe liking the vile ones. My phone and email were also bombarded with hate messages from some people I knew and some random people. I couldn't believe how vile my own child was and decided to sue her and Stan after all, but not before posting my side of the story. I did post a few videos I made, telling my side of the story with proof, and it garnered a lot more attention than I had expected. People on the internet were now siding with me, and because of all the hate being redirected toward her, Chloe thought it was best to message me, asking me to sort things out in person and remove the posts. I got angry at her assumption that I was going to follow her command and told her to tell Stan to meet me the next day at his father's office. Mark and I had talked during all this and decided that we would be suing Chloe and Stan as her guardian for defamation because we had suffered enough and all this negative attention was also affecting Mark's business. The next day, Stan showed up with Chloe at Mark's office. Mark had his lawyer beside him and told Stan and Chloe that they were going to sue him both for defamation. Chloe freaked out at the prospect of actually going to court over her petty videos and immediately deleted the TikToks she had posted in hopes of deleting evidence. But when Mark showed her the screen recordings of the videos, she began shedding crocodile tears, asking him not to do this and spoil her future. Stan even tried to guilt-shame me into taking back the case, but I asked him not to interfere now when he didn't stop the fiasco in the first place. Honestly, this has been extremely taxing and coming from your own child. It's even more devastating. So I have decided to get off social media for some time now and will be reading the comments after I am back from my internet break. Update 4. I am writing this update after a few months. So it's safe to say that this will be the last update because the problem has now been resolved. I would also like to thank everyone who posted advice in the comments. I am grateful for the support. So, since the last time a lot went down, especially with Chloe. Since all of this happened right before a long weekend, we decided to file the case the following Monday. On Saturday, I got a call from Mark asking me to come to Stan's house immediately. I rushed and what had happened was nothing short of appalling. So, after we had told both Stan and Chloe about the case, they both came back home and got into a heated argument. This led to Stan's girlfriend's health being affected, and she was rushed to the hospital due to shortness of breath. She and the child were safe, and after the checkup, she came back home. Chloe felt guilty for putting her health at risk, so she tried to apologize to her, but instead, got into a very nasty fight with her. Stan's girlfriend asked Chloe to give her some space, but Chloe wanted to hear that her apology was accepted and kept bugging Stan's girlfriend. This led to her obviously being extremely annoyed, and things escalated before Stan could intervene. The fight got physical, with Chloe pushing Stan's girlfriend in anger, but fortunately, Stan took the fall. On realizing what she had done, Chloe ran to her room crying. She came down a few hours later and was surprised to see us all sitting there. She knew this was about what she had done and immediately apologized to Stan's girlfriend, stating her behavior was inexcusable. Stan at this point spoke and asked Chloe to leave their house as soon as she could because he still thinks that she is a threat to his pregnant partner and unborn child. Chloe was shocked at this and tried to apologize again, only for Stan's girlfriend to let her know that this was the only option they were giving her. Seeing what Chloe had done, she brought this on herself, but I still found it harsh. Mark offered Chloe to stay with him for the time being, which she accepted because she had no other option. After Chloe left to pack her bag, Stan began crying and asked his dad to take back the case we were planning to file. He mentioned that he didn't wish to get into the legal mess at such a crucial point in his life and would like to dissociate from Chloe if that's the cost of his freedom. When I tell you everyone in the room had their jaws touching the floor, I am not lying. I understand that Chloe wasn't perfect and, to be fair, wasn't even a decent human at this point, but there was no way Stan was doing anyone any favors by going no contact with one of his children for the sake of another who wasn't even born yet. Both Mark and I looked at each other in shock and expected Stan's girlfriend to say something. All she said was that none of it was their fault and she agreed with Stan to the fullest. As I mentioned, as cruel as Chloe was, this was still too petty coming from her father. Mark didn't respond to Stan after this and left with Chloe once she came down, and I followed. The next day, I got an apology message from Mark's number. It was Chloe. She said that her grandpa had told her everything about how her dad wanted to disown her and that she realized too late that I was the only parent who solely cared about her. I didn't directly forgive her but asked her to take care. That evening, I called Mark, and we both came to the conclusion that the defamation case on Chloe right now wasn't a good idea as she was already going through a lot and clearly needed help. We decided to let Chloe go on one condition: that she put forth a public apology on all social media platforms for Mark and me, to which she agreed in an instant. In that post, she also declared that she was going no contact with her dad and his girlfriend. Stan, on realizing that the case had been dropped, tried calling Chloe in hopes of apologizing for mentioning the idea of disowning her. But Chloe, instead of tolerating him, let all her anger out and told him what was what. From him cheating on me to him abandoning her, he had nothing to say after that and knew the relationship was over. Chloe had taken a student loan and had decided to work on everything by herself. She did drop by my house before leaving and profusely apologized for whatever had gone down. I forgave her, but also made it clear that our relationship needed a lot of work, so I wished for distance, to which she agreed. As of now, Chloe has found a job near her college campus and is also going to therapy for her mental health issues. I haven't been in touch with her much but plan on inviting her on holidays. Mark also seldom talks to her, whereas Stan and his new family seem to be doing well, although he has mentioned to his dad that he regrets cutting his daughter off on bad terms. Now on to the next story. Story 7. Son's favorite uncle excluded him from his wedding. 6 months ago, my son, Leo, 14M, decided to cut off my brother, Jack, 46M. Now my mom, brother's wife, Sil, and other family members want me to make my son forgive him to keep the peace. For a little bit of context, I'm a 46M single dad. My family has always helped me in many ways, mostly babysitting when Leo was younger. Even before my son was born, we were all very close. We all live relatively close to each other, so we've been able to keep in touch with weekly gatherings, spending the holidays together, etc. Everyone loves my son, and my son loved them back. However, my brother Jack was always my son's favorite person. Back when my son was 3 or 4 years old, Jack and his wife had more flexible jobs than me. Think freelancing versus a 9 to 5. So they always volunteered to look after Leo, something he loved. Almost every month, they would take him to the zoo or the aquarium, or they'd even go camping with him. As my son grew older, he started to develop the same interests as my brother, like video games, photography, and music. When Leo was 9, he told me he wanted to have the same career as his uncle. This is all to say they were extremely close. Last year, my brother informed me that he and his girlfriend, Mary, were getting married. I knew that neither Jack nor his girlfriend believed in marriage, so when I asked them about it, they told me it was all Karen's idea, my sister-in-law's mom. Because Jack and Mary didn't care much about the wedding, and since Karen was paying for it, they let her plan everything from the venue to the food, music, etc. Karen decided to plan a destination wedding at a fancy resort in July of last year. We received the invitation, and it was addressed to both me and my son. I even had a +1 if I wanted. As soon as the website went up, I tried to make a reservation for our hotel room. I should clarify that I had to call the hotel to make my reservation because the link wasn't working, and I really couldn't risk not getting a room. When I received the email confirmation, it said, "Room for 2 adults." But I didn't think much of it and just assumed it was an error due to the language barrier with the hotel guy. I also bought the plane tickets for us around the same time. Fast forward to January, less than a month before the wedding, when my sister-in-law called me crying, saying that Karen had made a mistake with the venue. Apparently, the resort was for adults only, so they didn't allow anyone younger than 16. My son was 13 at the time. I asked her if it would be possible for Leo and me to stay in another hotel, but they told me the whole resort was child-free, so my son wouldn't even be allowed to attend the ceremony or the reception. I was disappointed, and I told my sister-in-law I'd talk to my son about it. I knew how excited he was about his uncle's wedding, but she insisted both her and Jack wanted to tell him in person. Honestly, my son was devastated. He started crying as soon as he was told he wouldn't be able to go. He pleaded with them and even offered to give them all of his savings so they could move the wedding. After 30 minutes of this, my sister-in-law got frustrated and just told him that he was being selfish and that this day wasn't about him. Leo eventually apologized and went to his room. After the wedding, my son just stopped talking to my brother. If Jack sent him a message, Leo would just ignore it unless it had something to do with me. For example, he would only reply if Jack asked him to tell me something because he couldn't reach me, etc. At our family gatherings, Leo would only respond to small questions like, "Can you pass the salt?" or "Help Grandma with the plates." But he would ignore my brother if Jack or Mary tried to start a conversation or ask him about school, etc. A month after the wedding, Jack and Mary offered to take him for a special vacation during spring break to make up for the wedding, but my son just ignored them and he later told me he didn't want to go with them. It was heartbreaking because I knew how much he wanted to go to that place, and I wasn't able to afford it yet, but he stuck to his guns. Something similar happened on Leo's birthday. He asked me if I was planning to throw him a party. I do it every year. And when I said yes, he asked me not to invite his aunt and uncle. I tried to convince him to invite them because they're family, and they were really sorry, but he just said that if they didn't want him on their special day, he didn't want them on his. My brother was crying when I told him he wasn't invited. However, things came to a head this past weekend. We were at my mom's house, and the conversation of Leo's university came up. My mom asked Leo if he was still planning on going to the same university as Jack and that he should start planning for that. But my son replied that he wasn't interested anymore and he had chosen to study something else. Then my mom said, "I thought you wanted to be like your uncle." And my son just said, Why would I want to be like him? At this point, I intervened and told Leo he didn't have to be so rude, but the damage was already done. Both my brother and sister-in-law heard what he said, and they left shortly after. Last night, my brother texted me saying I was an a-hole for letting my son continue with this grudge, and he even accused me of being jealous of their relationship, and that's why I wasn't doing anything to fix it. I just told him these were the consequences of his actions and that this was 100% his fault for allowing his mother-in-law to plan the wedding when she obviously hated my child. He hung up on me. My mom and some other family members think I should force my son to forgive my brother so we can all move on, claiming there was no ill intent and it was just a small mistake, but I don't think I should. My son was clearly hurt and he should be allowed to heal and forgive them only when he's ready. Edit. Sorry, I stopped responding yesterday. I got distracted by a Civ 6 game after seeing the reveal for 7. I'm going through all the comments and I just wanted to answer a question I've seen like 10 times now. I did not go to the wedding. I didn't want to leave my son alone while most of the family was away, and it just didn't feel right going to the wedding after what happened. Additional information from OP on the family conversations. His response was rude because of the tone, not because of what he said. He said what he said, and he was using a very specific tone to get a reaction out of his uncle. That's why it was rude. He wasn't just responding to the rather inappropriate question asked by Grandma. He was acting up, he was trying to pick a fight. Trust me, I've heard that tone many times before. I'm not saying I'm perfect. I understand why he is hurt and angry. I have respected his boundaries and helped him navigate this as best as I can. But that doesn't mean I have to accept him picking up a fight every chance he gets. As for the conversation, I didn't include my reactions because I didn't consider it relevant. Paraphrasing, of course, it went something like this. Mary, we made a mistake, and you won't be able to go to the wedding. Leo. But why? You invited me. I want to go. Mary. The place where the wedding is taking place only accepts adults. You can't enter. Leo, I don't get it. Can't you make an exception? Me, they can't. It's not up to Mary and Jack. Remember when you tried to get a part-time job at the pub and the owners told you they can't have children inside, let alone working there? It's like that. Leo, can you get married somewhere else? Mary, we can't. We already paid a lot of money for that place. Leo, I can give you my savings. I have X. Mary, it's not enough, and it's not just us who spent money. All the guests already spent a lot of money, and they don't want to lose it. Leo, my dad has money. He can give you money so I can go. Please, I want to be at the wedding. It's not fair. Jack. I'm sorry, Leo, but we can make it up to you. What do you say if we take you to Greece after the wedding? You always wanted to go. Leo, getting more and more upset. I don't want to. I want to go to the wedding. Why don't you want me there? Me, Leo, it was a mistake. They wanted you there, but we all made a mistake, and we didn't realize sooner there was a minimum age. Leo, it's not fair. Why did they invite me then? I want to be with my uncle on a special day. Mary, raising her voice, this is not our fault. It just happened, and you need to let it go. I'm sorry you can't be there, but you need to stop being selfish. This is my special day, not yours. Then Leo broke down. Like I wrote in another comment, I tried to console him, and I just shot Mary a shut-up look without saying anything at the moment. Jack did tell her something, but I didn't hear what he said. Once he calmed down, Leo said he was sorry and asked me if he could go to his room. Mary and Jack were saying sorry, but Leo didn't even look at them. I followed my son to his room to make sure he was okay, and he asked me to leave. I went back to the living room. Me. WTF is wrong with you? You have no right to yell at my son. Mary, I'm sorry. I'm too stressed. We had been fighting with my mom about this for 2 months. Me, I don't care. I told you on the phone he would be disappointed, and you made it worse. Get out. Jack. Please, Jacob. She didn't mean it. I'll make it up to Leo. Me. I said, I don't care. Get out. Then they left, and I just went to check on Leo. I don't have a photographic memory, so I don't remember every single word that was said. But this is the gist of what happened that day. Update, September 7th, 2024. So, I've received some messages asking for an update. I appreciate everyone who took the time to comment and send me messages. Some may have been a bit harsh, but I deserved it. Thanks for slapping some sense into me. The short version is that we'll stop going to the family events for a while. I talked to my brother, and he will respect my son's boundaries, and he also explained what really happened. And above all, Leo is doing much better now. Here's the longer update in case anyone's interested in the details. Mom and sister. The short of it is that I informed my mom that both Leo and I would stop going to the family gatherings until things calmed down and, more importantly, until he felt comfortable again. She was understandably upset, but I think she finally understood how much she had been hurting Leo. What surprised me is that my mom told me that Jack had become depressed, so she was worried about him, and that's why she was so insistent that Leo should forgive him. I basically told her that if we forced Leo to forgive my brother, we risked pushing him away from us. As for my sister, she was also sad when I told her we'd stop going to the family gatherings, but she said she understood. However, she suggested we make our own weekly tradition so the children can still hang out, and that's what we've been doing for the last couple of weeks. We decided my nibblings would come to my house one week, and then Leo would hang out at hers the next. So far, it seems to be working, and Leo is happy with this arrangement. I think it helps that he isn't being pressured by the adults expecting him to talk to his uncle. Jack and Mary. The weekend after I posted here, I texted my brother asking him to meet me so we could talk. I had told him that I wanted to speak with him alone, so Mary wasn't present. Jack immediately apologized and said how much he regretted what he had done and the things he had told me. He confirmed what I already suspected and said he was stressed because of the constant fights with Mary. He mentioned that he had considered divorce because of how bad the fights got. I may seem cruel here, but I basically told him that I didn't care about that. What I wanted was for him to tell me the truth about what the hell had happened. Jack maintains that he didn't know about the venue being child-free until last November. However, like many of you suspected, Mary had known for quite a while, maybe even the whole time. Apparently, this all started a few years back when Jack and Mary took Leo to the beach. While they were playing, my son had accidentally called Jack Dad before quickly correcting himself. From what Jack told me, it was a small mistake, like when you call a teacher Mom. Leo was embarrassed, but Jack just laughed it off. The catch: Jack's mother-in-law, Karen, and father-in-law had joined them for that vacation, and they overheard Leo. When they came back from their vacation, Karen had gone ballistic, claiming she was triggered by some random kid calling Jack Dad. Knowing that Mary can't have children, Mary had tried to explain it was just a misunderstanding, but Karen became extremely toxic and abusive towards Mary, and she started making demands like not inviting Leo over when Karen visited, etc. So when Jack and Mary decided to get married, and since they initially just wanted to elope and not have a party at all, Karen manipulated Mary and convinced her to let her plan the perfect wedding for her only daughter. Mary gave in because she was sick of several years of emotional manipulation and she just wanted to keep the peace. So Karen hijacked the wedding, and she chose the child-free venue on purpose. Mary discovered this when the venue was booked or shortly after, but she didn't say anything because every time she tried to argue, Karen would play the victim and get upset. Mary claimed that she had tried to negotiate with the resort that an exception be made so the children could attend the ceremony/reception, even if they stayed in a different hotel, but the manager stood firm on the policy. But the closer they got to the date, the more anxious she got until she finally admitted the truth to Jack in November. According to my brother, Mary exploded at Leo because of all the constant bullying and manipulation from her own mother, and she also felt extremely guilty by letting things get that far. For his part, Jack said that if he had found out before, he would have stepped in and canceled the wedding rather than exclude Leo and my sister's children. But by that point, a lot of people had already booked their flights and hotel rooms, so canceling wasn't an option. In the end, I told my brother that none of that excused the way they had behaved, especially his wife. She was a 40-plus-year-old woman picking a fight with a kid. She had yelled and called him selfish when all Leo wanted was to offer the £2,000 he had saved, so he could be part of Jack's special day. I reminded him that Leo looked up to him and considered him his hero, and he had let him down. He had shown Leo that he wasn't important to him the way Jack was important to Leo. I also told him that I would keep supporting Leo on going no contact and I'd be going low contact with him myself. He asked me for a chance to apologize to Leo, but I told him he had already apologized. All he could do now was wait to see if one day my son would accept his apology. Jack seemed hurt, but he told me he would respect our wishes and give us time and space. Leo. As for my son, I apologized for not standing up to him and forcing him to meet with the family every week. I told him that he could decide what he wanted to do with that part of the family going forward. He seemed reluctant to stop going, but I let him know that I would support him no matter what and that I wouldn't be upset. What made me happy was that Leo suggested we could stop going to the family every week and instead we could spend more time together, he and I, doing some of the things he used to do with my brother. Last week, we went to a vintage car show, and next week we're going to watch Wicked. I'm not a theater guy, but it sounds fun. I also told him I was worried he had stopped doing things he liked and that he shouldn't stop just because he had a falling out with someone he cared about. I basically told him it was okay to still enjoy things by himself or with someone else. He admitted he actually wanted to do those things but stopped just to spite Jack. I decided to give him an early Christmas gift and bought him some games he had been excited about but that he had refunded after the fight with my brother. He even convinced me to play with him some Final Fantasy Online game on his PS5 while he plays on PC. I admit I have no idea what I'm doing on that game since the last Final Fantasy game I played was still in 2D, but he seems to enjoy watching me fail. Any advice here is welcome. Finally, we decided to take a trip to his dream destination for my birthday. I was a little bit sad because it's going to be the first time in almost 50 years that I don't celebrate a birthday with my brother. But I've got my son, and that's all that matters. So yeah, Leo is happier and less stressed about the family. Speaking of which, I think the family is finally respecting our boundaries, so that's good too. I just hope my brother can work on his marriage. I may hate what they did, but I do want him to be happy. Now on to the next story. Story 8. My parents kicked me out for not giving my sister my college savings, but then I found out someone was secretly supporting my sister and our parents lied about everything. My family has been going through a bit of a rough patch financially recently, and I was nice enough to take up a job so I could pay my way through college, but their expectations are too unrealistic. Just last week, they told me that I needed to dip into my college savings and help my sister out, because she was about to move into a new house but was running low on money. For context, my dad quit his job a couple of years ago to start a new business. Unfortunately, right around that time COVID hit and his business was not able to take off the way he had expected. But he did not give up hope and continued to work hard on it, and he is still at it, and slowly but surely they are doing better. So that's great news for him, but that also means that we didn't have enough money to maintain our lifestyle for a really long time. My mother has always been a stay-at-home mom, so her starting to work was out of the question because that was not something that she wanted. Our parents told us that we had to figure out a way to live on our own. They would support us until we were 18, but after that, it would be difficult for them to set aside funds for their own retirement as well as take care of us. Already, they had used up a significant amount from their savings so that we could live the way we were used to during the lockdown and stuff. So, my sister and I were supposed to look after ourselves after we turned 18. A couple of weeks ago, I finally graduated high school and I am 18 right now. So, I knew that I would have to cover the expenses of going to college by myself. I had it all sorted out because I had been working ever since I was 16 and had done a couple of internships, so I had managed to save the money from that. Maybe it wasn't enough to cover college, but with a student loan, I would get by easily. My sister is 22 right now, and she recently graduated. She had also taken out a student loan, but she didn't have any savings of her own. Even while she was in college, she did not bother to work, and that's totally her call. I'm not going to judge her for it. But what I am judging her for is expecting me, her younger brother, to cover the rent for her first house now that she's moving out of my parents' house for work. She and a couple of her friends from high school are getting a house, and all of them have paid their shares, but she is just a couple thousand short of the amount that is expected from her. And she doesn't want to tell her friends that her family isn't exactly financially stable right now because that would be pretty embarrassing for her. Although I really don't understand that. If they are really her friends, why would they judge her? Anyway, that's the reason her friends can't cover her for now, and then she would have to pay them back later. My parents have already told us that after we turn 18, we should not be expecting any sort of financial support from them. So that leaves me. The worst part is that she didn't even come to me herself to ask for the money, but she told our parents that this was what she needed and got them to speak to me instead. Full disclosure, my sister and I don't really get along well. We are just really different, and I was kind of glad when she told us that she would be moving out because having her moved back in after she graduated from college for a couple of weeks until she found a job was pretty tiring for me. Last week, when this happened, we were all living together. I'm going to start college in a couple of months, and I already have my uncle and aunt who have signed off on the loan. My sister was supposed to move out a couple of days back, although I don't really know what happened with that. 3 days before she was supposed to move out, my parents came to my room and told me about how she was just short of a couple of $1,000s, and they knew that I had been saving money for college, so they wanted me to just dip into those savings for this and help my sister out. They even reassured me that she would pay me back at the earliest, even though she could have just spoken to me herself and it would have been much more respectful. To be honest, I didn't even know how she could afford the rent at all because from what I know, she hadn't worked a day and I didn't think that she had any savings of her own. But apparently she did. It was just not enough though. But that was not my problem, and I told my parents that it was her own fault that she hadn't worked when she was in college, even though she knew that our parents would not be supporting us as adults. Now, her not being able to afford rent for her first house was a problem that she herself had created, and she was going to have to deal with this on her own. Besides, covering my college expenses was way more important than her being able to move into a house with her friends. I thought that my parents would be reasonable enough and understand why I did not want to share my savings with her because so far they have never been the kind of parents who have treated my sister and I differently. But instead, they started throwing a fit about how I was acting and told me that I was being really selfish. They had thought that it would be easy enough to convince me, I don't know why, and when I refused to help her out, they started fighting with me. After a really bad argument with my parents regarding this, my dad just snapped at one point and he told me that if I was going to be selfish and not share my savings with my sister, then that would just mean that I did not value my family as much as they had expected me to. So then, even they would behave the same way with me and be selfish and ask me to leave the house. Basically, my only two options were to either help my sister out and share my savings with her or get kicked out. I chose the second option because honestly that was really humiliating for me. I had never expected my parents to use the fact that I was relying on them for a while, at least until I made it to college, against me. But I guess their priority was my sister right now. And I'm not sure, but I think it was because they didn't want anyone to know that our family hasn't been doing well financially, and if my sister had been honest with her friends and had them cover for her, she would have had to tell them all about our financial situation. And since these are friends from high school, their parents would have found out as well, and their parents know my parents pretty well since it's a pretty small and close-knit neighborhood. So I guess that's why they did not want my sister telling anyone about what was going on. In fact, they had put in a lot of effort into hiding the fact that we were struggling financially. Not even anyone in the family knew about it except for my uncle and his wife. My uncle is my dad's older brother, and since he had been one of the first investors in my dad's business, of course, he knows about it. Initially, my dad had even been against the idea of me having my uncle become a co-signer on the loan application, but had to agree with it eventually since being a co-signer on both my and my sister's applications could backfire. So even though he did not like the idea of being even more in debt to my uncle, he had to let me go to him for help. And it wasn't even like I was going to college nearby, I was going to college out of state, so that was going to be even more expensive. Anyway, I knew that their reputation meant a lot to them, and I knew that they were going to extreme lengths to make sure that nobody found out about how they were struggling, and after the fight that I had with my parents and I left home, I still couldn't deal with the fact that they had just kicked me out because I refused to play by their rules. It was insulting and humiliating, and so I decided to take advantage of the fact that their reputation and the money meant so much to them. After that argument, I started packing my things immediately, and my parents did not even make an effort to stop me. That night itself I had packed all the things that I needed and stuffed them into a bag. Then got a cab and headed to my uncle's place. I did feel a bit guilty about bothering him constantly, but when I got there and explained the situation to him, he told me that I was welcome to live with him and his wife for as long as I wanted to. Their kids were grown up and living independently, so I'm staying in my cousin's room right now. When I had left, my parents had been standing at the door, and they did not try to stop me even when my uncle called my father up to speak to him about what was going on with me. My dad made it sufficiently clear that if I was not going to think about my family and put them first, then they had no place for me in their house. It was ironic that they were calling me selfish, but in my opinion, they were the ones who were actually being selfish. So for the past week, I've been living with my uncle and they have been nice enough, but that has still not helped to take my mind off of things. My uncle and my aunt keep telling me that things are going to be all right and that they are positive that my parents are going to come to their senses eventually and apologize to me. But I'm not so sure anymore. And last evening, I had been feeling particularly low, and then I don't know what came over me and I just decided that I needed to talk about this, but I was feeling really vindictive as well. So instead of venting to my friends, I decided to post and spill all the tea. I typed out a post with every little detail of what had happened and completely exposed my parents. And then I hit the post button. After that, I kept my phone aside and I went out for a walk because I knew that as soon as they found out about the post, my parents would start blowing my phone up. I hadn't blocked them anywhere so far because I had been expecting them to reach out to me at some point, but in the past week they had not even bothered to check on me. Anyway, when I came back home from my walk after about 30 minutes, my uncle and my aunt were both pretty serious, and they told me that they had read my post. They didn't feel like it was necessary right now, but since I had already posted it without even speaking to them about it, all I could do was apologize to them for not letting them know. But I was just feeling really depressed and I wanted to get back at my parents somehow. They looked a little disappointed but didn't say much. So at least I am good on that end. But then when I went back to my phone, I saw that I had several missed calls and messages from my parents, just as I had expected. All of the messages were along the same lines. That they had been right to ask me to leave the house because it was very obvious that I could not think about anyone apart from myself and that I was really selfish. And with this post, I proved that I was also a bad person. They were accusing me of ruining their reputation by making it sound like they were the bad guys here, and that they had kicked me out on purpose even though it had been my choice to leave because I would rather abandon my family when they needed my help than actually stand up like a man and be there for them. Most of the messages were really angry and I felt kind of vindicated because at least now they were feeling exactly how betrayed and let down I had been for the past week. And then while I was reading the messages, I received a call from my mother again and I decided to pick it up this time. As soon as I answered the phone, I regretted it because she was crying, as if someone had died, and I could hear my dad screaming at me in the background. He was cussing me out while my mother tried to speak to me through tears. It was kind of difficult to understand what she was saying, but I was able to make out that she was trying to get me to take that post down because a lot of our relatives had messaged them that it was unacceptable for them to try and force me to help them out financially because I was still really young and I had my own future to think about, and instead of helping that daughter out, they were trying to take money from one ticket to give it to the other, and that was not fair. My mother was trying to make it sound like I hadn't told the entire story in my post and was acting as if I had framed the story in such a way that made them look like the villains. But honestly, I had only shared my side, and I don't think it was my fault that our relatives did not agree with their behavior. And also, this is social media, I can share whatever I want to. But at least I had the decency of putting out the full truth and not hiding any details. But my mother started telling me that if I was sharing my side of the story, then I also should have shared how they had always supported me and my sister when it was possible for them. But now they were only expecting us to help each other out because it was difficult for them to do so. She wanted me to put up a post about how extravagantly we lived while our father was supporting us. And then I started feeling really guilty because that was true. Both my sister and I had been spoiled by our parents, and they had left no stone unturned to make sure that we were well cared for when my dad was making a lot of money. But even then, I don't think that excuses the kind of behavior that I have had to face recently. Most importantly, my parents were upset because I decided to go public with this information even though I knew that the last thing that they wanted was for people to know that they were struggling with money. So right now, even though I have received a lot of support and love from a lot of family members and friends on social media, I'm still feeling guilty about the conversation that I had with my parents last evening. And even the way that my uncle and aunt are behaving, it's making me feel bad about what I did. I feel like I should just take that post down, but before I do that, I just wanted to make sure that I'm actually in the wrong and it's not just me being manipulated into thinking that I did something bad. So, am I the asshole for putting up a post on social media and exposing my parents and their financial struggle? Edit. My relationship with my sister has not been good for a really long time. We used to be close when we were younger, but for the past 4 or 5 years, she has been acting really weird and I don't exactly know why. Maybe it's because of the kind of friends she has because from what I know, all of them are really mean and snarky, and even though she didn't bully me or my friends when we were in school, I know that she had a reputation of being one, and that's part of the reason that I don't get along with her anymore, because I just can't stand bullies, to be honest. She has changed a lot, and I can't say that it's for the better. We hardly even speak anymore. And that day when she decided to send our parents to speak to me about borrowing money, I felt weird, because even though we were not exactly on great terms, we were at least on speaking terms, and she definitely could have come to me herself. In fact, if she had come to me herself, then I might have actually let her borrow the money. Anyway, she's been really weird about a lot of things recently, and her behavior has been very awful. She has a terrible attitude problem, and that's why I don't really speak to her anymore. Update 1. Hey, so people in the comments had mixed opinions, and eventually I just decided to go with my gut feeling. I took that post down because even though I had received a lot of support from my relatives, it didn't really mean much. It's not like anybody had actually reached out to me. It was just superficial support, and I knew that. Also, not even the people who had reached out to my parents to let them know that what they were doing was unfair had reached out to me. So it was obvious that it was more important for them to call my parents out on their behavior than actually be there for the person who had been through something. These people just wanted to be a part of the drama and feel included. So, I took that post down because I had gotten back at my parents, so the purpose had been served. For days have passed since I last spoke to them, and I deleted the post this morning. After that, I decided to make things right with my uncle and aunt because I felt like I owe them an explanation even more than my parents. They had tried to be there for me to the best of their abilities, and in spite of that, I hadn't even spoken to them before just making that post. And things had been pretty weird between us because I knew that they did not agree with my approach. So, I woke up super early today, took that post down, and then I made breakfast for them so I could surprise them, and they were pretty surprised. When I apologized for not speaking to them, they told me that it was fine. They had just been taken aback by the post. They also apologized to me for acting weirdly after that post because they just didn't know what to do or what to say to me to make it better. I guess it has just been a bit of a misunderstanding between us, and we decided to talk it through. I told them that I had just been feeling very upset and humiliated by how my parents had treated me, and even though I was very grateful to them for being there for me, I felt like I had to get back at my parents somehow, and maybe it was not the right thing to do, but I had to get it out of my system. And they told me that they understood why I had done what I had done, but they didn't necessarily agree with the approach that I had taken by posting about it online for everyone to see. They told me that a lot of people in the family were very jealous of my uncle and my dad because in comparison to them, their lives had been great, and a lot of my relatives couldn't stand that, so it was natural for them to feel great about the fact that my dad was struggling, and that was part of the reason why he did not want any of this getting out. So that explained why so many of my relatives had shown me so much support in the comments but hadn't actually bothered to reach out to me. They were happy about my dad's downfall but couldn't care less about what I was going through. Anyway, that was a lesson that I had learned, and I told them that I had taken that post down. Then they told me that they were more than happy to have me over because I had always been a good kid and reminded them a lot of their own two sons. When they brought that up, I decided to tell them that I was also really upset with my sister because a huge part of the reason that my parents and I even had that fight that day was because I was upset that she hadn't come to me to ask for the money herself. I wasn't actually hoping to get an explanation about that. I was just venting to them since I hadn't told them about this bit before, and neither had I mentioned it in my post. But when I told them that my sister had sent our parents to me to ask for the money, they started looking very surprised. It was clear that they knew something, so I asked them what was bothering them, and they told me that they didn't understand why my sister had felt the need to make my parents ask for money to cover rent because she had already asked them to send her some money for rent, and they thought that they had covered it all. Then it was my turn to be surprised because I didn't know about any of that. After speaking to them for a bit more about this, I found out that while my sister had been in college, she knew that my parents were not in a position to support her, so any time that she would need, she would contact my uncle and aunt, and she had been relying on them as well. The student loan only covered all the college-related expenses, but of course people have other expenses as well, and my uncle and aunt had covered all of that. They had never told me about it because my sister had wanted it to be a secret and had promised them that she would pay them back as soon as she had enough money to do so. And recently, a couple of weeks ago, she had reached out to ask them for a couple of $1,000 because she was moving into a new house with her friends and needed to cover her share of their rent. They had happily agreed to help her out because she finally had a job, and she had told them that she was going to start paying them back now. So now, I'm really confused because if my sister had already borrowed money from my uncle to cover her rent, then why had she asked me to give her money? It just doesn't add up, and not even my uncle and aunt have any answers right now. They could talk to her themselves and get to the bottom of this, but they think that it would be better for me to discuss it with her myself since we clearly have a lot of things to talk about and clear the air between us. And I guess that's exactly what I'll have to do if I want to find out what's going on, because this is really fishy. Update 2. So 2 days have passed since my last update, and after a lot of deliberation, I finally decided to speak to my sister because that was the only way to get to the bottom of what was going on. I hadn't blocked her and neither had she, so I just texted her if she would be willing to speak to me, and she agreed quite easily. I called her last night and we ended up talking for quite a while because, as it turns out, I don't think she had any fault in any of this. So apparently she had indeed borrowed some money from our uncle to cover part of the rent, but then one of her friends just randomly decided that she was going to be living with her boyfriend and not her friends, and that meant that everyone would have to contribute extra for the rent because one person had dropped out of their plan. And that put her in a bit of a difficult position because the house that they were planning on renting was pretty expensive. So she decided to ask our parents for help just this once, and she told me that she had asked them to help her out with the money themselves. She hadn't told them to ask me. So she had no idea why they had done that, and she didn't even know they had come to me to ask for the money until I told her about it last night. Apparently, my parents had told her that the reason we got into a fight was because I was demanding money from them to add to my college savings, and they had refused, and my sister had bought it. She had no idea about the real reason I had fought with our parents, and when she found out, she was shocked. We were able to guess that our parents had probably not wanted to help her out by giving her money from their own pockets, and so they had come to me and made it sound like she was asking me for help. We worked that out, and after that we got to talking about our own sibling relationship. I decided to be honest with her, and I told her that the reason that I had distanced myself from her was because she had changed a lot as a person and had become very mean and was a bit of a bully. I thought that she was going to deny it and we would get into a fight, but she actually accepted it and said that she knew that she had been terrible in high school, but in college she had changed a lot and she wanted to work on our relationship as well. But I just seemed so closed off that she didn't feel like it would work even if she tried to talk to me. So we decided that we were going to let the past go and try to work things out for the sake of our future, because it was obvious that our parents had taken advantage of the fact that we don't get along and tried to play us against each other. And for those of you who want to know, she was able to move into the new house with her friends, and she had to come up with some lame excuse as to why she only had part of the rent with her, but thanks to my post, they were able to figure out what was going on with the money anyway and offered to cover for her until she could pay them back. And in spite of what she had believed, her friends actually did not judge her. So kudos to them. Anyway, I was able to get to the bottom of what had happened, and as a bonus, I was able to work things out with my sister as well. So I'm quite happy with the situation right now. My parents and I have still not spoken, and after what I just found out, I don't think we are going to be on speaking terms anytime soon. In fact, I would even say that my sister is probably about to stop speaking to them. Update 3. So guys, I recently started college and I already love it. A good few months have passed since I last spoke to my parents, and they have blocked me. I don't know why they blocked me, because judging by their actions, I should have been the one to block them. Anyway, my sister doesn't speak to them anymore ever since she found out the truth about what happened between me and my parents. But we are trying to actively work on our relationship and go back to being the siblings that we used to be. So far I would say that it's going pretty well, and I'm really happy about that. My uncle and aunt have obviously kept in touch with me, and it's a really happy coincidence that one of my cousins, one of their sons, recently started working on a project that will require him to come to my state quite often. So I'm going to see him pretty soon now. And I don't even really miss my parents anymore. I do wish that we might be able to make things right someday in the future, but until then this works just fine with me. Now on to the next story. Story 9. My ex-wife cheated and left me for her rich boss and got pregnant. But when I inherited millions, she wants me to pretend I'm the father and is begging me for another chance. So, here's the deal. My ex-wife, 32F, and I, 35M, got divorced about 6 months ago, and within a month of that, she was pregnant. My ex-wife, let's call her Olivia, and I had been together for 3 years and married for a year and a half when she told me that she had been having an affair with her boss, let's call him Samuel, 42M, for a couple of months. We have a 1-year-old son together, and when she told me about the affair, I was still trying to process it, but she already had the divorce papers and stuff ready because her boss had told her that he was ready to marry her. So far, the only reason she had been holding out was because she was not sure if Samuel was ready to commit to her or not, But as soon as she had some sort of commitment from him, she decided to dump me and the kid and take off with him. The divorce was relatively straightforward because I wanted full custody of our son. And I got it. She didn't even bother to fight for it. Neither did she fight for anything else. I got everything that we had, and it made sense because now that she had Samuel, she was rich enough to have the lifestyle that she wanted. After the divorce was over, I did not hear from her until recently, although I had heard from a couple of common friends that she had announced her pregnancy just a couple of weeks after our divorce was finalized. I don't know exactly how many months along she is, and neither does that make any difference to me since she's out of my life for good. The divorce had been tough for me emotionally because unlike her, I was actually in love with her, and I thought that we had something real. In the 3 years that we had been together, I had always noticed that she had a bit of a materialistic streak, but I had honestly never thought that it would come in the way of our relationship at any point. I've been doing pretty well for myself since I am an oncologist, but I can't deny that Samuel is a lot richer than me since he owns the company that my wife used to work in. Even though they had grown pretty close since she started working there, I had never felt threatened by him because I always thought that they were very good friends, and I was always quite secure about our relationship because I believed that Olivia loved me as much as I loved her. Clearly, I was mistaken because if that had been the case, she wouldn't have found it so easy to dump me and leave, and I can still understand finding it easy to leave me, but how somebody can give birth to a kid and then just abandon them makes no sense to me. She didn't bother to check up on how her son was doing even once after this divorce, and that made it much easier for me to hate her because that's what she deserves. When she left me, she tried to tell me that the reason she was leaving was because I never had any time for her, unlike Samuel, who was always there for her. It's not that easy to fool me though. I know that the real reason she was leaving was because he was much richer than me, but when I brought it up with her, she started cursing at me and acted like I was a terrible person for even implying that, even if it was the truth. But anyway, the reason she reached out to me recently was also something to do with money, and that just proved me right because recently I've been named as the sole heir to my uncle's fortune. For context, my uncle was a businessman who built a fortune for himself in real estate and owns one of the largest real estate companies in the state. He never married and never had any kids of his own, but we were pretty close. He adored me, and I knew that, but I still hadn't expected him to name me as the sole heir to everything that he owned. Everything is still being evaluated, but I know for a fact that I'm looking at an estate worth more than $2 million, and I haven't even started to think about how much his assets are worth. He left the company to me as well, but I'm honestly not interested in running it. Luckily, he had also left instructions to me in case I did not want to run the company, and so, according to him, I have appointed his CFO as the current CEO so the company keeps running smoothly, but I'm still going to be benefiting from whatever he makes from the company so I can easily just retire right now. However, I'm still going to continue working because I love the work that I do, and with all the money that I have right now, I can even give back to society in much bigger ways. But that's enough about my own noble plans. Let's talk about Olivia's not-so-noble ones. Last week, I told a couple of my friends about my inheritance over dinner and drinks, and all of them were pretty surprised, but most of them seemed happy for me. But I guess one of them was not happy because somebody snitched and told Olivia about it, so that's how she found out. The next day, she showed up at my house and said that she needed to talk to me. She was heavily pregnant, and I was about to tell her to go away, but I had a gut feeling that I would want to hear her out, so I decided to let her in because she was back after almost 6 months of the divorce, and I guessed that it had to be something important that brought her here. However, at the time when I had invited her in, I had no idea that she knew about my inheritance. Anyway, she tried to make some small talk with me, but I was really not interested, so I just restricted myself to one-word replies. Then, she congratulated me on the inheritance, which was her first mistake. I was a bit surprised that she had been able to find out about it, but I figured that maybe one of my friends had ratted me out, so I didn't say anything and just thanked her. She then asked about our son and how he was doing, and that really upset me because for the past 6 months, she had pretended that she didn't even have a kid, and now all of a sudden, she had a conscience and wanted to know how her kid was doing. I ended up snapping, and I'm pretty thankful that my son was not at home at the time. He was with my parents because otherwise he would have heard the way that I spoke to his mother. I don't regret it though since she totally deserves it. Anyway, when she asked about our son, I just told her to get to the point and stop beating around the bush because I knew that she was here with some purpose and not just to make small talk and ask about things that she didn't even care about. I was getting really impatient, and she could see that, so she decided to get to the point and told me that she was here to discuss the new addition to our family. Obviously, I was very confused because I had assumed that she was pregnant with her boss's baby and not mine. She had been pretty sure about it back when we were separating, and I was so emotionally distraught about so many things that I didn't even question it. In any case, even if the baby was mine, I knew that one paternity test after the baby was born would let me know, and I would deal with that when it happened, but for as long as she was pregnant, it was better that Samuel dealt with her because I didn't want anything to do with her unless the baby was mine. It sounds mean, but that's how it was, and I didn't think she would care about it either because she was pretty confident that the baby was Samuel's. Anyway, I was quite shocked when she referred to the baby as the new addition to our family because I didn't know if that was a fact or not. So I first decided to ask her if she was sure about the paternity, and if the baby was not mine, I had no interest in speaking to her anymore. But instead of taking the hint, she told me that she hadn't conducted a paternity test yet, but would do so if that's what I wanted. However, regardless of who the biological father of the baby was, she believed that since she was still married to me when the baby was conceived, I had an equal right to the child as well, and we hadn't discussed this earlier, but it was about time that we did since she was just a couple of weeks away from giving birth. Then she dropped a bombshell on me and told me that she wanted my name on the baby's birth certificate as the father, because she believed that it would be better for both her kids to have the same last name. I definitely had not seen that coming, and it took me a couple of minutes to even process what she was saying, but once I had done that, I immediately declined. I didn't really want to, but I ended up laughing in her face because her plan was so stupid. It was quite easy for me to connect the dots, and she had already made the mistake of letting me know that she knew about the inheritance. So now she was obviously trying to secure the baby's future, and in some way even her own, by making sure that I took responsibility for the baby and perhaps even paid child support. Now that I was suddenly richer than even Samuel, she was singing a different tune around me, and I found it very funny, so I ended up laughing in her face at her plan. I straight up told her that she was really stupid for even thinking that I would entertain an idea like this, and I told her to get out of my house because I didn't want to speak to her anymore. But she didn't leave. She continued to sit there and try to reason with me. She told me that she was ready to get a paternity test, but she believed that it would be better for her children to have at least some sort of a relationship, and having the same last name would help them bond better with each other. She tried to make it seem like she really cared about the kids and their relationship, so she was actually asking me to allow her to add my name to the birth certificate of her baby, so that our son would have a sibling and would find it easy to relate to the baby once they were born. It was pathetic because she herself hadn't been there for our son for the past 6 months after our divorce and hadn't even bothered to check up on him, even though she had visitation rights. So I told her that our son barely even had a mother anymore, and now she was acting like it was important for her to make sure that our son was able to bond with his sibling, and even if I were to agree that our son should have a relationship with his sibling or half-sibling, depending on who the father is, it still doesn't make sense to add me to the birth certificate as the father of the baby if I'm not actually the biological father. So I made it very clear to her that if the paternity test proves that I am the father, then I might even entertain her idea, but if it doesn't, then I'm simply not interested. Once I made that clear to her, she tried to argue with me some more and was desperately trying to make it seem like she really cared about the relationship that her future baby would have with our son, regardless of who the parent was, and that's why she wanted my name on the birth certificate. But I knew that the real reason was my inheritance and nothing else, and I told her that I knew what she was actually after, so she shouldn't take me for a fool, and obviously she was not happy about the implication that she was a gold digger, so she started screaming at me again, but I just told her to leave because otherwise I would call the cops, and she finally left. I could tell that she was regretting leaving me, but this was just karma for screwing me over, and after she left, I was still pretty upset about what she had just tried to pull off because I couldn't believe that she thought I was actually that stupid and I was going to just let her name me as the father of the baby. Of course, if I'm actually the father of the baby, then I would have had no issues, but her suggestion that all our kids should have the same last name and that's why she wants to add me to the birth certificate of the baby regardless of whether I'm actually the father or not just did not sit well with me. Had she come to me to ask for a paternity test so we could find out the actual parentage and then worked our way forward, then I might have respected it, but this was clearly just a plan for her to claim her stake in my inheritance, and because she couldn't come up with a valid plan, she was grasping at straws. I was pretty upset and I couldn't let this go without retaliating because so far I hadn't done anything at all to get back at her. But after she had come to visit me and we had had that discussion, I was so angry that I decided to reach out to Samuel, and I sent him an email about what just happened. At that point, I did not even care if he already knew about her plan or not. I just wanted to create trouble in some way or the other, and that was the only idea that I could come up with. I wasn't sure if it would actually work or not, but I got lucky, and as it turns out, Samuel had no idea that this was what she was up to behind his back. I didn't get to know any of this through them, obviously. He did not reply to my email, but after I sent it to him, he apparently got into a really big fight with Olivia, and I don't even blame him. I think anybody in his position would have done the same thing. But instead of cutting her losses and dealing with the situation at hand, she is simply too busy blaming me and has been posting about it nonstop. Not just posted, but she has also been speaking to all of our common friends and trying to get them to talk to me and set the record straight with Samuel. I don't even know what that means because as far as I'm concerned, I already set the record straight with him by telling him the truth. Obviously, none of our friends are on her side. They think that what I did was perfectly justified. This is strange because I'm pretty sure that one of them had to be the person who ratted me out and told her about the inheritance. I just didn't find out who it was so I could cut ties with them. Anyway, until then I have Olivia to deal with because she's really getting on my last nerve. She has been posting relentlessly about how I'm jealous of her lifestyle and I'm upset about the fact that she left me, which is why I've been actively trying to ruin her relationship with Samuel and feeding him a bunch of lies about why she visited me last week. She claims that she only visited me to see her son since I haven't allowed her to see him, and even that day she was fighting with me because she wanted to see him and I refused to bring him back from his grandparents' place. That's what she wants me to admit, but I'm not going to do that since that's clearly a lie. I have done everything in my power to avoid speaking to her or interacting with her, but she just won't stop talking about me, and it's getting a bit too much because for the past week she has posted about me every single day, and it's just annoying that she thinks that she can get away with lying about what really happened. Most of our friends know the truth, but a lot of people are even supporting her in the comments section, mostly people who don't know me, and I know that she's doing all of this for sympathy so that Samuel can fix things with her and buy a bunch of lies that she has been spewing. However, if it's coming at the cost of my reputation, even if it's among people who don't even know me, I don't think that it's fair. So I've been considering putting out the truth for everyone to see. And the reason that I have held back is because I know that it's going to damage her reputation significantly and Samuel is definitely going to dump her. They're not even married yet, so it's going to be very easy for him to just leave since they're only engaged. But before I do that, I want to make sure that I'm doing the right thing. So, would it be wise if I posted about how my ex-wife wanted to name me as the father of her baby and the birth certificate? Update 1. So I did it. I actually posted the truth before even opening the comment section here because my gut feeling said that I should just go for it, and that's what I did. Afterwards, I came to Reddit to validate my decision, and I'm very grateful that most people believe that posting my side of the story would be the right thing to do. I had blocked her after the divorce, but I unblocked her just so she would be able to see this post. Most of our friends are supporting me, and even though I know that I'm doing what I think I'm doing, with or without the support, I think it means a lot to me that they are standing by me because I'm pretty sure it's really pissing her off. She hasn't been able to get the kind of sympathy that she wanted, and from what I know, she has had to move back in with her parents because Samuel doesn't want her living with him anymore. It has been a week and 4 days since I sent Samuel that email, and even though he hasn't replied to me, a lot of things have happened since then, and I know that there is trouble in paradise. I'm pretty glad that this is happening to them because she left me and our son for someone else just because he was richer than me, and Samuel, well, he was just a home wrecker. I'm glad that karma is finally catching up to them, and I really hope that this teaches them a lesson of a lifetime. Even if it doesn't really matter because I'm still going to be rich and I'll be happy with or without them. My son and I are even planning on taking a vacation in a couple of weeks because I think I need a break. I've been working myself to the bone ever since the divorce, and now that I'm finally getting the closure that I thought I needed, I think a well-deserved break will do me a lot of good, and when I come back, I'll be ready to work even harder. The only piece of the puzzle that I haven't been able to figure out yet is who exactly had ratted me out to Olivia because so far I have asked several of my friends if they had said anything about my inheritance to Olivia, and all of them have denied having anything to do with it. The people who I had told about the inheritance are really close to me, so I really hate the idea that one of them had been lying to me, but well, that's how it is. Anyway, I'm going to start planning my vacation with my son now. Update 2. Olivia showed up at my door again today, and this time my son was at home as well. So I told her to go away instantly because I was pretty sure that she was not here to see him and she was here to probably pick a fight with me, and I didn't want my son to see me acting like that since Olivia just brings out the worst in me. But she refused to leave and she told me that she was here to see her son, and since she had visitation rights I couldn't exactly stop her. And that was true. So I had to let her in and allow her to see our son. I was not happy about that at all. But if I had refused, there might have been legal repercussions for it, and I have already spoken to my lawyer to prevent this from happening in the future. Just to be clear, it's not that I don't want her to see our son at all. I would obviously love for our son to be able to have a normal relationship with both his parents, but I don't want her coming and going out of his life whenever she wants to. The first time that she left home to move in with Samuel, she didn't even bother to say goodbye to our son, and it was very obvious that in the following weeks, he had found it very difficult to cope with her absence. I did not want that repeating once again, so I've spoken to my lawyer and we are going to file for supervised custody visits so I can monitor when she gets to see him and she can't waltz in and out whenever she wants to because that's not good for our son. Anyway, our son was a little confused to see her at first, but afterward he seemed happy enough. She ignored me for the entire time that she was here, but I noticed that she started to take a bunch of videos towards the end of her visit. The only thing that I said to her before she left was that I did not want her to post any of those videos online because I did not want our son to have an online presence when he was so young. To that she only told me that she was saving these videos for herself in case she missed him too much, which I think is a bunch of BS, but I didn't argue with her because it would be pointless. Anyway, that was what happened and I think it was pretty weird, but it's not like she did anything wrong, so I can't complain. Update 3. So I had asked my lawyer to file for Olivia to have only supervised visiting rights after she visited us out of the blue to see our son a couple of days ago. But after what happened last evening, I don't think that's going to be necessary anymore. After her last visit, she hadn't posted anything against me, and in fact, she had been pretty inactive on social media for quite a while. She had made a few posts against me after I had put out my side of the story, but that was just for a few days. And then she just went silent and then she paid me a visit to see our son, which was also quite strange. However, what happened yesterday is what takes the cake because she just showed up once again randomly with a lawyer and handed me signed paperwork which said that she was giving up custody of our son. She and her lawyer informed me that they would file the petition and get this approved by family court soon enough. She just wanted to give me a heads up before all of that happened so I wouldn't be taken by surprise. I really couldn't stop myself from asking why she was doing this because just a couple of days ago she had visited us to meet our son. But she didn't exactly give me a straightforward answer. All she said was that she had decided that it was in the best interest of our son to only have one parent, and that would be me because she was going to be too busy taking care of her future kid. And interacting with him the other day had made her realize that he was better off without his mother since neither did he seem to attach to her nor did she feel anything when she was around him. So she wanted me to take over entirely and told me that she wouldn't be bothering us anymore with her presence. I was really confused about what was going on and I kind of felt bad for my son because his mother had said that she did not feel attached to him, and even though he doesn't even know what that means yet, I know that it would hurt him if he understood, but I did not try to stop her since no matter what I wanted she had made up her mind, and if she did not want to be a mother then I was not going to force her to, and she definitely was right about one thing. It would be better for him to just have one parent around him, and that would be me because I was actually willing to be a father to him. Before she left, I asked her if she knew anything about the paternity of her kid, and she told me that she had decided she would only get a paternity test conducted after the baby was born, and until then I had nothing to worry about. She also told me that if the baby turned out to be mine, we would work out an arrangement that worked for both of us, but until then she did not want me to speak to her, and well, I respect that. It might seem insensitive, but I already have a lot on my plate to be worrying about a kid who is probably not even mine. Update 4. I finally heard back from Samuel after almost 4 weeks since I sent him that email, and I learned a lot of things that I did not know about Olivia and this situation. He started off by apologizing to me for, well, everything, but I'm not going to get into that. After the apology, he told me that they actually had conducted a paternity test a couple of weeks back and they knew for sure that the baby was not mine. The baby is his, and even when she had approached me, she had known about it. That's why he had been so upset and broken things off with her, because it was very obvious that she did not truly belong to anyone in the actual sense of the word. She tried to tell him that she had only visited me to talk to me about seeing our son more often because she claimed that I wasn't allowing her to see him. However, He did not buy that, and he decided to believe my version of what happened since in the past 6 months. He had kept pushing her to come see our son, but she was the one who always kept procrastinating, and it seemed very unlikely that she had changed her mind all of a sudden. So he broke off their engagement and asked her to move out. Then she left. Even after she had left, she sent him a couple of videos with our son to prove that she had actually visited our son a couple of times and she hadn't been lying about what she had said to him. But he's not an idiot and he could see right through her. At least now I know why she had taken all those videos. It was just so she could use it to prove herself right, and I can't imagine something more disgusting. She was literally using our son to get back together with Samuel. And when she realized that it was not going to work, she decided to give up custody of him. Anyway, he told me that they are still going to raise their child together, and she's claiming an exorbitant amount of child support right now, which is expected since she quit her job after she got engaged to him, but that's their problem now and I'm done with her. Soon enough, I will have full sole custody of our son, and even the procedure of inheriting everything that my uncle left me is almost over, so I'll be pretty rich. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have been able to imagine living a life like this, but right now I'm really happy about how things have turned out. Now on to the next story. Story 10. Daughter hates her mom and uninvited her from her wedding but asked me to walk her down the aisle and wants her mother-in-law to replace her mom. I refused, and now she might cut us off forever. So this has been an ongoing issue in my family for a while, but now that the wedding is coming up, everything has come to a head. I, 50M, have a daughter, Emma, 26F, who I've always had a very close relationship with. I've been married to my wife, Emma's mom, Laura, 49F, for 30 years now. We were a solid family, or at least I thought we were. Here's the backstory. A couple of years ago, Emma met her now fiancé, Tom, 28M. Things moved fast between them, and she was head over heels for him. We were happy for her at first, but something changed about a year into their relationship. Emma became distant from us, especially her mom. Laura and Emma used to be really close, but all of a sudden, Emma started snapping at her for little things, avoiding family dinners, and not sharing anything about her life. Then we found out why. About a year and a half ago, I overheard Emma and Tom having a conversation when they didn't know I was around. She was saying horrible things about her mom, stuff that really broke my heart. Emma was telling Tom that she couldn't stand how overbearing her mom was, that Laura always tried to control her, and that she felt like Laura was jealous of her life and success. She even said she resents her mom for putting so much pressure on her when she was younger. I was floored. Laura has always supported Emma in everything she did, from helping her through college to emotionally supporting her during rough patches. I never saw any of this coming, but instead of addressing it right then, I wanted to wait and talk to Emma calmly later. When I finally brought it up with her, she completely shut down and got defensive. She claimed I was taking her mom's side, and that I didn't understand what it was like to grow up with someone who was always in your business. She said some really hurtful things and ended up storming out. After that, she basically cut off her mom entirely, except for the absolute bare minimum communication for holidays or family events. Laura's heartbroken. I'm angry. It's been a mess. Fast forward to now, Emma's getting married. She called me last week to ask if I would walk her down the aisle, but here's the thing. I don't feel right doing it when she's treating her mother like this. Laura is not even invited to the wedding. Emma said it would make things too uncomfortable if her mom were there. I told Emma that I can't walk her down the aisle if she's excluding her mom, who's done nothing but love and support her all her life. I said that until she makes things right with her mom, I won't be part of the wedding. Emma was furious. She accused me of choosing mom over her, said I was ruining her big day, and claimed I was punishing her for being honest about her feelings. She's now threatening to go no contact with both of us, and I'm torn up inside. I love my daughter, but I can't stand by and watch her treat her mother like this. ITA for refusing to walk her down the aisle? Update 1 day later. I didn't expect my post to get this much attention, and honestly, I'm still trying to process everything. Things have changed a bit since I first posted, and unfortunately, it's not for the better. I tried reaching out to Emma again, hoping we could work things out, but what I found out has only made the situation worse. Here's what's happened. I sat down with Emma to try and calmly explain how much this situation has been hurting her mom and me, but she wasn't open to it. Instead, she told me she's asked Tom's mom to take on some of the important roles at the wedding that would normally be Laura's, like helping her get ready on the morning of the wedding and giving a speech at the reception. When I asked Emma why she didn't want her mother there at all, she laid out a few specific reasons that frankly felt more like excuses. First, she said Laura has a tendency to make everything about herself, and she was worried Laura would cause a scene or try to take the spotlight. Emma brought up how at her engagement party, Laura made several comments to the guests about how hard it is to let go of your little girl, and kept trying to give a toast even though Emma and Tom had planned for only the best man and maid of honor to speak. Emma said she felt embarrassed and that it was one of the reasons she felt Laura would try to control things on the wedding day. Emma also claimed Laura has a habit of undermining her decisions. For example, when Emma first started dating Tom, Laura expressed concerns that things were moving too fast, and Emma felt Laura was trying to influence her choice in partners. This is a sensitive topic for Emma because she feels Laura has never fully approved of Tom and that tension would ruin the day. Hearing all this was hard. Laura may not be perfect, but the idea that she would intentionally make Emma's wedding about herself or try to sabotage the day is just unfair. She's only ever wanted to be there for her daughter, and I know Laura's been nothing but supportive, even when she's had concerns about Tom. When Emma told me that Tom's mom, Sandra, would be filling these roles instead, my heart broke. Laura has dreamed of helping Emma on her wedding day since she was a little girl. Being uninvited was already devastating, but hearing that Tom's mom is taking her place in these intimate moments feels like a complete betrayal. It's not just that Laura is being excluded. It's that someone else is being given the role she should have had. I tried telling Emma that this would only hurt her relationship with her mom further, but she doubled down, saying she needed people around her who supported her decisions and didn't make her feel guilty. She's convinced that Tom's mom understands her better and is more in tune with who she is now. It was a gut punch to hear that, especially knowing how much Laura has always supported her. As for walking her down the aisle, no, I haven't changed my mind. I can't be part of this wedding when Laura is being disrespected like this. It feels wrong to stand by Emma's side while she's doing this to her mother, who has only ever tried to be there for her. I'm not sure where our family goes from here. Emma is now saying she might cut contact with us if we don't respect her boundaries. And honestly, I'm heartbroken. I don't want to lose my daughter, but I also can't stand by and let her continue to treat her mom this way. Thanks again for all the support. I'm still trying to make sense of everything, and I guess only time will tell how this plays out. We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.